delicate, unique fly rods that are very pricey, but he brings in people from all over the United States. Almost every state has had a visitor here to Blue Ridge, and then internationally as well. So that business, which has roughly 5 employees, is a huge driver for our community as well. Just wanted to highlight on some of those businesses because they're very unique to not only our county but our area. Do you have any questions? You know, I think similar to other communities, there are certain areas within the county that do not have access to good internet, whether it be a lack of service provider or low speeds. And we're talking not just in the remote areas, just outside of town, very low speeds, which can cause problems when you've got second homeowners who may still be working in Atlanta but need to dial up and connect for a conference call. We hear it often. People want to know if we've got space where they can come and just connect in town because their house, you know, out on the mountain doesn't get service. So just wanted to mention that as well. Thank you for being here. Hopefully you'll have some time to explore a little bit.
The year was 2017, and the House of Representatives had a very aggressive agenda of legislation that it wanted to pursue. And on crossover day, we were all very optimistic that we had achieved a lot and we were over halfway there to the goal. And like the Falcons, we found out that halftime score doesn't really mean anything. And at the end of the year, it was probably one of the most disappointing sessions that I can remember because it was so frustrating. And the consensus opinion of the folks that I talked to were that if this is what it's like the year before an election, 2018 is going to be awful. But there was a guy in the House that went around the state, and everywhere he spoke, he said, "The people of Georgia did not elect us to come every other year. They elected us to represent them every year. And we are going to work this year, election year or not. And we're going to get some things done." And he said that everywhere he went. And at the end of the year, it was probably one of the best sessions that I can ever remember us having. We undertook complicated issues, problems that the can had been kicked down the road year after year after year. We had a 2-year Rural Development Council. We had some major pieces of legislation that were proposed. We had a Transit Governance and Financing Committee that proposed some major pieces of legislation that we are still going to see the impact of for generations. We saw an adoption bill that will allow foster children to have stable long-term homes. There was some very significant legislation in an election year following a contentious, non-productive session. And it's all, in my opinion, due to the tenacity and determination of a guy who would not say, "That's the way it is." It was more of, "That's the way it's gonna be." And that's our speaker. And I want to introduce him to y'all. He needs no introduction, but a man who made 2018 a very successful legislative year for all the people of Georgia. David Ralston.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction. I told Chairman Powell I didn't know he listened to what I said. But that was very kind. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. And let me welcome you to beautiful Blue Ridge and to House District 7. Anybody notice any blue signs coming into town? Those have become collector's items up here. They're most popular about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. So if y'all want to go out during the night and get you one to take back home, feel free to do that. But I am deeply honored to welcome all of you to this very special place that I call home. Oftentimes people come up here and they say, well, why would you ever want to be in the General Assembly and ever have to leave up here? I still don't know the answer to that question, but it's a great community, not just the natural beauty, but the people here. They have a great work ethic, they're independent, they're forward-looking, and they're very positive, and I am blessed beyond measure to be able to call this place home. I want to give a shout out. I don't know, did Mayor Whitener, is she still here? Yeah, she's still here. To Mayor Donna Whitener of Blue Ridge, does a great job leading that city. Commission Chairman Stan Helton is still here. Did I hear Mayor Seabolt? Yeah, I see Tommy back there. The mayor of McKaysville, a lot going on down in McKaysville now. And I saw my good friend, Commission Chairman Charlie Paris, I think, come in. Chairman Paris is the commission chair down in Gilmer County, and just a great friend to work with. I know that the Chamber of Commerce is represented here. I won't try to name all of them because I can't see back there to see who's here from the chamber or the other elected officials, but I want to thank all of them for being here. I know they all worked to make this meeting possible, and I want to thank them for their efforts. It was about a year ago that we convened the first meeting of this council in Tifton. And that day I charged the members of this council with adopting the motto of Georgia's colonial founders, not for self, but for others. And I ask you to find ways to support rural communities so that our children and grandchildren might have more and better opportunities. I ask you to help us see to it that someone's zip code did my opponent here she's been wanting to throw something at me, I think. So I ask you to help us see to it that someone's zip code did not dictate their lot in life. You all took those words to heart. I was absolutely delighted with the progress this council made in 2017. And as Chairman Powell said, it mattered to me that we go to work last year because the people did not elect us to work every other year and to take a year off and have elections. Because I can promise you that after we're all dead and gone, they're still going to be having elections every other year here in Georgia. And we can't take off every other year. We've got too much to do. And y'all took up that cause and shared that with me, and I am grateful for that. As we close the year's meetings in Milledgeville in December, you all had compiled a lengthy list of recommendations. And was it lengthy? but it was submitted to the full House of Representatives. Out of those recommendations came 5 legislative packages which were adopted by the House, then the Senate, and were signed into law by Governor Deal this year. House Bill 735 by Representative Patty Bentley of Butler. Let's keep Patty and her family in our prayers. Establishes a tax credit for maintenance expenditures on Class 3, also known as short line railroads. This will improve our freight logistics network and support our Georgia ports. House Bill 876 by Representative John Corbett, who's here today, of Lake Park, protects Georgia's forestry and wood products industry from overzealous regulation and zoning. House Bill 769 by Chairman Rick Jaspers of Jasper creates the Rural Center for Healthcare Innovation and Sustainability. It also establishes the regulatory framework for micro-hospitals modeled off the Piedmont Mountainside facility just down the road from here in Ellijay. House Bill 951 by Chairman Jason Shaw of Lakeland, who could not be here, creates the Rural Prosperity and Innovation Center in partnership with Abraham Baldwin Agricultural College in Tifton. It also creates a Deputy Commissioner for Rural Georgia at the Department of Economic Development. And I am delighted that former House member and Chairman Amy Carter was appointed by Governor Deal to fill that new role. I think, is Amy with us today? Are you okay today? I haven't gotten a text from you. And finally, Senate Bill 402 by Senator Steve Gooch, who represents this county, and which was carried in the House by Chairman Jay Powell, makes strides in providing a framework for expansion of broadband internet in Georgia. And you heard what Christy Arp said now about broadband up here. Were you listening? We've got work to do. I've said it before and I will say it again. I don't think rural Georgia has ever had a more productive session in the Georgia General Assembly. In fact, I've got a clipping on my desk of a headline from one of our major newspapers in the state, not the AJC, which we do not allow in our area. It's too expensive to bring it up here. But it says rural Georgia has best session ever in General Assembly. And I think that is a great testament to your hard work and to your efforts that you put forward last year. Taken together, these measures demonstrate the clear resolve of this council to respond to its charge to empower private businesses to create jobs in rural Georgia. I want to thank the many state agencies and other stakeholders who work shoulder to shoulder with you in examining these issues and vetting this legislation. I want to particularly thank Governor Nathan Deal and his administration for embracing this worthy cause and this agenda along with us. Governor Deal has been a true champion for economic development in Georgia and continues to work to ensure prosperity. That prosperity is available in every corner of our state. And somebody said we've got an election coming up soon, and I'm going to tell you that somebody's going to have some big shoes to fill when Nathan Deal walks out of that Capitol next January. As you begin this next year of meetings, I know you will continue to examine issues that are important to rural prosperity like internet access, health care, and workforce development. I know you will work also with those same state agencies and stakeholders to identify partnerships and solutions that can be beneficial in our rural communities. I know two such examples are going to be discussed this afternoon, where the University of Georgia is providing resources to help rural communities, and I appreciate those efforts. Looking ahead, your task remains both simple and unchanged. Find ways to help businesses grow jobs in rural Georgia. You have done commendable work thus far, and I want to finish my remarks by thanking every member of this council. As I look around the room, it dawned on me this morning, there is no way I could have put together a better group of men and women, a better group of House members for what is a high priority initiative than the group that's here today. And I want to thank all of you for your service. I know this is a sacrifice. Well, maybe not coming to Blue Ridge is a sacrifice, but I know that the time that you spend away from your family and your home and your business is a sacrifice. And I want to tell you that that does not go unnoticed, and I am grateful, and this entire state is grateful. I want to particularly thank Co-Chairman Terry England and Jay Powell, as well as Vice Chairman Sam Watson. I also want to, because he paid me, I want to give a special shout out to Deputy Chief of Staff Tim Bearden. I thought that was funny. He didn't pay me, actually. But I want to give a shout out to Tim Bearden for all of his work in coordinating these meetings and staff assistance. He comes to these locations in advance and makes sure everything is ready and works really hard to put together the content of the programming, which I think has been excellent. I am very proud to live in and represent this community in the House of Representatives. As you'll notice, it is a rural community, and that's one of the things that we all love about it and take great pride in. But like every other rural community, we want our kids to be able to grow up here, to be educated here, and find a good paying job here. Your efforts to make that possible in every rural community across this state are greatly appreciated. I look forward to being with you tonight at dinner and visiting with you and fellowshipping with you. And in the meantime, I hope you have a great afternoon of meetings, and may God bless each of you, your work, and our great state of Georgia. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Christy was talking a little bit about some of the cut and sew plants here in Blue Ridge, and she missed one of my favorites. Y'all notice I wear blue jeans a little bit, and I'm kind of partial to a company actually based in Tennessee, but the blue jeans are sewn here in Blue Ridge, and it's called Diamond Gusset. And for fellas like me that are kind of large in places, it you know, the belly sticking out and everything else, it's kind of nice to have a pair of blue jeans that fit. But they're sewn here in Blue Ridge, and having come from Winder, Georgia, that used to be called the work pant capital of the world, cut and sew operations still have a special place in my heart. A lot of folks from there at home used to do that and made, while not killings and not huge livings, they did allow them to have insurance and buy farms and homesteads and feed their families. And so, like I said, those operations have a soft spot in my heart. But we wanted to talk just a little bit. I think it's always important as we do legislative agendas and things during the General Assembly that we always circle back every once in a while and just kind of think about and review some of the things that we have done. And wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that we were able to accomplish this year. And of course, the speaker mentioned several of the bills that passed, which kind of took Jay's portion of this away from him. He just sitting back there grinning. But I did want to talk a little bit about some of the budgetary items, because a lot of the things we heard about last year are things that didn't necessarily require legislative action, but did need some type of state funding to help implement, or either language within the budget to help implement or to move forward. So I want to move through several of those items very quickly. And if you'll look at the thick stack in front of you that has been compiled by the House Budget and Research Office and Martha and Christine and the whole gang there, if you'll turn to page 12, it kind of starts some of the budgetary items. And we'll look at the amended items first. And I'm not going to go over each one. I'm just going to kind of hit some high spots as we go along. Speaker had mentioned Deputy Commissioner Amy Carter at the Department of Economic Development and the creation of the position there for the Deputy Commissioner for Rural Georgia. And so we kicked that off in the amended budget, and you'll see that item again also in the FY19 budget. The governor brought to us, as they had been working with economic development and realizing that many of our local communities that may not have easy access to a 4-lane highway or an expressway nearby, but tend to deal a good bit with their local airports. But in order to have economic development with some of the larger companies that look to come to our state, some of the runways were not short enough to land some of the aircraft necessary for them to conduct business. So in that, there were 13 runway extensions throughout the state: Burke County, Colquitt, Cook, Coweta, Evans, Macon County, Morgan County, Newton County, Polk, Screven, Seminole, Washington, and Wilkes County airport runway extensions. So it's about almost $26 million that was spent for that. Forestry, of course, we learned last year, especially during our meeting in Waycross, about the importance of the forestry industry. And Chairman Nimmer, I'm glad to see that you knew how to drive on a curvy road. I know that straight roads are pretty much your speed, and just glad that you know that the steering wheel actually turns. But putting in some additional funds for updated equipment for the Forestry Commission. And also within Regents, then you'll see the seed money that we put there to start off the Center for Rural Prosperity and Innovation. That was a recommendation from our council. And of course, it's now official. It is housed at ABAC. President Bridges and Scott Blunt are here today, and they have already been on the ground running and working, and I think we're going to see some results very quickly from them, as well as from our Deputy Commissioner Amy Carter. We did ask for the Regents to conduct a study. One of the things we heard in several places was the lack of professional degrees below Macon, kind of below the fall line. So we've asked the Regents to do that study. They will report back to us by October the 1st on what kind of the suite of offerings are from Macon South. I wish Chairman Brooks Coleman was here this afternoon, because one of the things that we heard a little bit about, but was something I know is a passion for him, is dealing with the Leadership Academy for Principals. And so that was kicked off within the amended budget, and we'll be moving forward. I know it's something that he and Superintendent Wilbanks in Gwinnett County have talked about for a long time. Superintendent Wilbanks, while now is the superintendent of the largest system in the state, has his roots in rural Georgia and understands many of the issues that face Georgia in rural systems. I'll mention it again here in just a minute when we get into the main budget items from FY19. But I think, since we're starting to talk about education just a little bit, I think it is incredibly important that you also realize the importance of fully funding QBE that we did this year. That $167 million, which equates to about $102 per full-time equivalent student, of every student around the state for small school systems, for small rural systems, is incredibly important. As you look at page 13 under the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities, you'll see some additional one-time funds for establishing some of the behavioral health crisis center beds around the state. As we visited in Bainbridge and Thomasville last year, that particular item came up several times there, not only from the hospitals, but also from law enforcement. It's something we hear continuously across the state about that. Moving on down the list, actually Speaker Pro Tem Jan Jones brought an item to us as we were working on closing out the amended budget, and that dealt with the high cost that many rural hospitals and hospitals across the state had faced in the flu epidemic, flu outbreak we had this previous year. It wasn't much in the grand scheme of things, but about $1.2 million was put in through the Department of Community Health. Every small rural hospital in the state got some additional funding for those expenses that they had not counted on. They had not necessarily seen coming because of the way the flu broke out throughout the state this year. So as you have learned and hearing from many of the rural hospitals we've gone around the state, you understand that every dollar truly matters to them. So we know that that will help some as well. We've also asked, one of the things that we had a presentation late in the year was from Matt Hicks and our friends at Grady, talking about a little bit different way of Medicaid delivery within the state as well. And so we asked DCH to start looking at what it would look like to provide Medicaid healthcare delivery in the state in a different form or different fashion, using the dollars that we currently use or have today, but doing it in a way that is different and that's more effective. And so they've kicked off that study, and hopefully we'll hear about that more probably in the January to February time frame coming up. Also within DCH, you'll see about middle of the page, about $1.7 million for an enterprise data solution, updating the computer systems there. And you ask, why is that important? That's important because, again, one of the things we heard from our rural hospitals was their inability to access data for the areas in which they serve to understand fully what is going on medically in those areas, whether it's a high instance of diabetes or stroke or whatever else. If they better know what is going on in their particular geographic area, they know better then how to institute and implement programs within those areas, then to treat the population ahead of time, do preventative treatments, to do education. And so that's going to be one of the things that's going to help an awful lot with. Moving on down to the bottom of the page, you'll see the Technical College System of Georgia. One of the things that the governor recommended were 2 mobile welding labs to go around the state to set up to do on-site training for employers. We felt so strongly about it in the House that we actually doubled that to 4, and actually looking potentially going forward at doing a couple of additional units, but also taking that model of training to see if there are other skills that can be taught in a similar fashion and to mobilize those as well. Under Technical College System, you'll see a little over $10 million for equipment updates, and then for some advertising to help Georgians understand the opportunities that are available to them through the Technical College System. That is not a comprehensive list from the amended budget, but it does amount to about $53.5 million that will have a huge impact throughout the state and especially in rural Georgia. If you move on to section 14, or excuse me, page 14, I'm thinking budget now, I'm saying section 14, but page 14, top of the page, again, dealing with behavioral health, allowing for the expansion of bed space across the state. We put in $6 million, which is actually enough to stand up 1 standalone unit, but what DBHDD has found as being more effective recently has been that they will take those funds and expand upon units that they already have around the state that are ready to go. They are having a little bit of trouble finding communities that are actually ready to do those behavioral crisis centers within their communities. So a lot of times it's easier and quicker and more effective to expand the centers that are already there. Moving on down, you'll see several entries dealing with substance abuse, and then dealing with some of the recommendations coming out of the Commission on Children's Mental Health. As we understand the need for school improvements in school safety, it's also very necessary to understand when those young people are heading to a crisis stage and be able to figure that out ahead of time. And so we've implemented several things there to hopefully kind of get in front of that problem. The establishment of some additional federally qualified health centers, FQHCs as they are known, in Bryan County, and then for behavioral health services in Early and Emmanuel counties. The kickoff for the bidding process for the request for proposals for the Rural Health Systems Innovation Center, which is part of Chairman Jasper's bill. And the Office of Rural Health will be working on that, and we're looking forward to seeing that kick off and get rolling here very shortly. Dropping on down through the page under DCH, Chairman Parrish, of course, he had been with us on several of the meetings last year, and he certainly understands the trials and tribulations of rural hospitals. And you'll see several things that he had brought to the table, and some of them were recommendations that came out of this, and some of them were recommendations that he brought through doing further study. But increasing the add-on payment for newborns in rural counties by $250, and those are populations of less than 35,000. The triage payment rate for rural hospitals, a bump of $20 per patient there, or $10 for urban, but $20 for rural. The expansion of the St. Joe's Candler Hospital Rural Surgical Fellowship Program that they're doing there. We'd also heard as a recommendation for kind of a clearinghouse for physicians that are looking to enter the workforce in the state, or even physicians coming from another state wanting to come to Georgia to set up practice. And so working through the Georgia Board for Physicians Workforce, setting up a kind of a one-stop shop there for those individuals to be able to figure out where they can go practice and meet the needs of Georgians. One of the things that we'd recommended coming out of the MEDR program, or MEDR meeting we had last year, was helping rural docs, especially those doctors that are the only physician in a county, with some of their malpractice insurance premiums. Those doctors, as you know, are general practitioners, but in many cases, the cases they're seeing are very specialized, so they're having to kind of act as a specialist and the generalist at the same time. Unfortunately, that means usually that their med-mal insurance is considerably higher than someone practicing in an urban area, because they have the ability to send that patient on to someone that specializes in something. So setting up a grant program to help those physicians in those counties. I think there are 13 counties that either have no physician or only one physician practicing in those. So we're doing a grant program of $10,000 per physician to help them with their malpractice insurance. Something our co-chair or vice chair is very happy about is the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine coming to South Georgia in Moultrie. Some startup funds for that, and also asking them to come to us with kind of what their long-range vision, what their long-range plan is for their programs, not only in Moultrie, but also in Gwinnett County going forward, and how we can coordinate and partner with them as a state, much the same way we do with Mercer and Morehouse. Several other items. One I want to mention real quick on top of page 16 under the Department of Human Services, dealing with the area agencies on aging and some of the transport for non-emergent transport issues there. I will tell you that we have actually asked Chairman Tanner and the Transit Council to look at that issue, and they're going to be looking at that this year to help us address that in a better way. We heard, again, I think it may have been in Waycross, where we were understanding that 3 different people needing to go to the same spot, living at the same place, had to be transported with 3 different vans because each were on 3 different programs. There was no way for them to all get in the same van, go to the same spot at the same time. We all understand that's incredibly wasteful. Most of that is some type of federal regulation that requires that. but allowing us to look deeper and figure out what it is that we need to do to break down those burdensome rules to allow 3 people to get in one van to go to the same place at the same time instead of 3 vans doing the same trip. Under DPH, you'll see $2 million to help address the maternal mortality problem we have here in Georgia. Georgia, as we know, ranks as the highest in maternal mortality in the country. There's no reason for that. And we're going to figure out what is causing that. We're going to figure out a solution to that, because that is not something that we necessarily want to be number one in. Under DPH as well, one of the things that I think it matter, Courtney Twirliger with Emmanuel County EMS had brought up the point that they're not doing regional EMS training any longer. That was cut back when the budget cuts were happening in the late 2000s and early teens. And so we've reinstituted that through the Department of Public Health around the state. You'll see $1.1 million added for the Department of Agriculture in their domestic and international marketing programs. They'll be with us tonight, helping us. They're going to be cooking supper for us, so you'll get to talk to them about what they're working on. They're up and running already, even though we're not into that budget year. They've been excited, just like Amy has been, and just like Dr. Bridges has been at ABAC. One of the things we heard from our friends in Dublin that addressed us, I believe it was in LJ last year, was about the need for a special attorney or specialist attorneys in helping with downtown redevelopment and some of the historic tax grants and preservation grants and tax credits and those sorts of things, that it's very hard to find attorneys that specialize in that. And so we have actually instituted putting an attorney at DCA to help with that in particular going forward as well. Running on down the list real quickly, you'll see under economic development there, dealing with our state-owned rail lines that are operated by short lines, of fairly major investment of a little over $12 million for those. Our partnership in DOE with our Chief Turnaround Officer for several of the struggling rural school systems around this state, helping them with the soft skills education issues that we talked about and heard from several folks last year. Primarily, I think in Albany was where that was talked about. And then as well, going on for some increased marketing funds again for the technical college system, to help young people understand where some opportunities are for training and for good, high-paying, skilled jobs around the state. So all that said, again, not a comprehensive list, but about $70 million of an investment of Georgia taxpayer dollars into an areas of this state that we know are struggling. Those areas that the speaker had mentioned and talked about as seeing not prosper the way that we were seeing other areas of the state prosper. And so we as a House and our colleagues in the Senate, under the leadership of our speaker especially, have kind of put our money where our mouth is. Not just paying lip service, but actually doing something about it. I want to thank each and every one of you, because everyone that is a member of the House that's in this room today voted for this budget. And I appreciate that. And I know folks around the state certainly appreciate that. So we will go through this year, and as we travel through this year, it's as Jay said, we're not going to have quite as many meetings as we had last year. Last year we were kind of trying to see the landscape around the state. This year's the time to come back and see what's in the ditches and gullies, to do the deep dive into the weeds on a lot of things, and we're certainly going to do that. Some of these meetings that you're going to see coming up are going to be pretty tough to take and understand the content and try to figure out what it is that we need to do to address the issues going forward. So thank you all for your attention last year. Thank you all for your commitment last year, and thank you all for your commitment this year going forward. So at this point, unless there are any questions, because Jay, I think, just fell asleep. I'm not sure what he did. He looked like he was asleep. Oh, okay. Well, he ate 3 or 4 of those fried pies over there a while ago, so I was getting worried about him. So our next group of presenters is going to lead off with Laura Meadows. Laura has been an incredibly long-time friend of mine and Cindy's, and someone we cherish her friendship. And Laura has been leading the Carl Vinson Institute over at the University of Georgia now for several years, and she's coming forward to talk about the Renaissance Project. With her is going to be Danny Bivens. Barry Aycock is the mayor of Clarksville. Barbara Kessler is the city manager of Clarksville. And Mary Beth Horton, who is the Downtown Development Authority director, are going to come tell us a little bit about a project they've worked on in Clarksville, Georgia. When you see a map in a minute, I got on to Laura about this a minute ago. It says something about Northwest Georgia. Got several cities from Northwest Georgia pinpointed on it. And then there's poor Clarksville over there by itself in Northeast Georgia. So I'm not sure. Somebody evidently is a little bit directionally challenged. I guess it's Laura. So, Laura, thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. Guilty as charged on that geography problem. But since the great city of Clarksville is represented here today, we wanted to make sure we put them on the map. Mr. Chairman, to our co-chairs and to the distinguished members of the committee, thank you for allowing me the time to come back to see you this year, as I did in December, to talk a little bit about some rural development initiatives of the University of Georgia. And particularly, we want to talk about downtown development. If you look at this lovely photo here on our cover slide, this is actually the great city of McKaysville and the, I guess, sort of a twin city of Copper Hill, Tennessee. As you've already heard, McKaysville is in this county, in Fannin County, up the road a ways. And as Christy has already mentioned in her comments, we're actually very proud to be kicking off, with the help of the Speaker's Office, a project to work on a downtown development master plan for the city of McKaysville. And so we're kind of announcing that today. We actually kicked off that work last week with the steering committee meeting. Several members of that committee are here today, and we're glad they're here, and we're very excited about that project. I think all of us would agree, in fact, I know we would, that vibrant, strong, growing downtowns are really important for economic development. And certainly, there's no place that's more important than in rural communities around our state. 5 years ago, at the University of Georgia, we were fortunate enough to enter into a formal partnership with several of our great partners who are in the room today to put some real focused attention on downtown's technical assistance and strategic planning for those communities around Georgia that were interested in improving their communities and really helping plan for the future. You can see the partners here, several units of the University of Georgia, including the Carl Vinson Institute of Government, the Small Business Development Center, and the College of Environment and Design. But in addition to that, the Georgia Municipal Association, who's represented by several folks, including their new executive director, Larry Hanson, here today, the Georgia Department of Community Affairs, represented by the Commissioner, Christopher Nunn, here today, as well as the Georgia Cities Foundation. Over the past 3 years, we've been very fortunate to have added an additional funding partner to this project, the Lyndhurst Foundation, which is actually in the Chattanooga area, and very interested in the whole Chattanooga metropolitan region, which includes parts of Northwest Georgia. So they became a funding partner for us in our downtown development work, and so we're very excited about that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. There's actually 3 parts to this process that we use. A couple of those parts actually utilize students with our College of Environment and Design at UGA, which is great for them and great for us and great for the cities as well. But what we want to focus on today is the really comprehensive part of this work, and that's our effort in putting together master plans for cities. And you can see these cities that we've worked with in developing these comprehensive plans over the last few years. This is the map that the chairman gave me a little grief about, and there's method to my madness here. Focusing in a little bit more on Northwest Georgia, with the help of the Lyndhurst Foundation, we've been able to do more work in downtown development in the Northwest Georgia area. And with the funding that we just received, really it's unheard of to get it 3 years in a row. We've actually gone back to do some follow-up work in Lookout Mountain in the city of Trenton. But in addition to that, we are starting a comprehensive master planning process in McKaysville and Copper Hill. We're excited about this for a couple of reasons. It's actually the first time we've worked with more than one city on a comprehensive master plan. And also it's the first time the project actually goes across a state line too. So instead of us just talking to you about what we plan to do in McKaysville, we thought it might be a good idea to hear from a city with whom we've had the pleasure of working, to talk about a little bit about how this plan worked for them, and more importantly, what the results have been in their city. We pride ourselves in helping put together plans that don't sit on a shelf, but actually become implemented for the well-being of the citizens in that community. And so that's why I have the dot of Clarksville on there, Mr. Chairman, because they've agreed to come and talk. Obviously, there's going to be some differences in what we did in Clarksville and also what we'll be doing in McKaysville and Copper Hill, but the process is sort of the same, even though it's customized for those communities. So I've asked Danny Bivens, who is here and who actually does all the work for us in this area at the Carl Vinson Institute of Government, to briefly describe the process, the steps that we involve in putting together these master plans, and then we'll ask our dynamic trio from the great city of Clarksville to come up and talk about what this meant for them. We actually have Mayor Barry Aycock, as the chairman said, and City Manager Barbara Kiesler, and the DDA Director Mary Beth Horton. So Danny, come give us a brief overview, and then we'll just have you, Mayor Aycock, after that. Danny?
Thank you. I'm going to touch real quick on our planning process. When we come into a community, our first step, right up there, where we are now. When we come in, we know we're coming in from the outside. We also know good things are taking place. We're not starting from scratch. So we come in and we partner with that community. We start with a steering committee. They're going to talk a little bit more about this in detail. But the first thing we want to figure out, right, is we want to look at past plans. We're not starting from scratch. So what we want to do is look at past plans, do a plan review. We want to look at economics and demographics. And then we want to talk to people. The most important thing. What we're really good at is listening and asking questions. So we do that in a lot of different ways, right? Interviews, focus groups, survey, community meetings, town halls. We understand that the local community is driving this process. This is their plan, not our plan, right? And that also means that they are the ones that know what works well, where the issues are, the problems, and if we ask what the solutions are. That's the important part. This is our community's plan, our partner's plan. Once we do all that, and that's step one, that funnel represents our steering committee. Because our steering committee has to determine what are the top issues, the priorities, right? The things that the community has said over and over again that we need to focus on in this planning process. So when we start, we do not know what the issues are going to be when we tackle this plan. We just have to trust the process, and we have to trust that in step one, those top issues will come up, the steering committee will point us in the right direction, and then in step two, we start to figure out where we're going to go. You know, at the Institute of Government, we have a studio, a design studio with landscape architects, with graphic designers. We got interior designers, historic preservationists, and planners. We all work on these plans together. And what we do here is we listen to the community, we look at those top issues, and we try to figure out where design or illustrations can help bring that community vision and point people in the right direction, because words can be sloppy and a picture is worth 1,000 words. And most importantly, those visuals represent the ideas and the solutions of that community, and when they see those visuals, they know they were heard and they're believing in the process. That leads us to step three, right? The step that I don't see enough plans have in it, the implementation, the work program. This is where most plans wind up sitting on shelves. They might be great ideas. They might be even aesthetically beautiful. But if someone doesn't assign the who's going to do it, when's it going to get done, and how is it going to happen, then nothing happens. And so we try to focus on two things, short-term and long-term. Short-term, we're hoping that things are already being implemented before we leave. People don't have the patience they used to. So we need to show that the plan is being implemented in the short term. At the same time, longer term, which really means things that cost more money usually, right? It takes some time to pull those pieces together. So over each year, you have a work program that has both short term and long term. And that is our planning process. And I'd like to bring up, if I could, our friends from Clarksville to talk more about it.
Good afternoon. Clarksville was founded, can you hear me okay, in 1823 as the county seat of Habersham County, which is celebrating its bicentennial.
Try again.
Okay, start over. You're good. Okay, all right. Our location in the northeast corner of Georgia, near Tallulah Gorge, helped Clarksville to become the first tourist town in North Georgia. We had several tourist hotels and a thriving downtown in the early to mid 1800s. But the Civil War put an end to that economic boom. But Clarksville rocked along just fine for about 175 years. By 2014, we had a population of about 1,500 people, and we had a thriving downtown. There was not a lot left of the original. The wooden hotels were gone, but we still had one section of a historic brick storefronts on the east side of our main street. It was busy with several very popular restaurants, and we thought we were doing great. But on the evening of March 5th, 2014, one of our most popular restaurants just off the square caught fire. The building was Hart Pine. And even though the fire department was less than a mile away and was there in a matter of minutes, the fire jumped over into our main area and destroyed half of our historic downtown within several hours. The devastation included 3 restaurants, an apartment, and 3 other businesses employing a total of about 30 people, which was a major blow to our downtown. So our downtown development director and Main Street director, Mary Beth, is going to tell you how we came together with our tragedy and we rebuilt.
Good afternoon. So imagine waking up one morning and seeing your beautiful and historic downtown square covered in ashes. This is hard to kind of look at, but for us on that March morning, it was a reality. We knew that we had something big to do, but honestly, we weren't exactly sure how we were going to get there. We were left with this huge mess, but we were also left with a tremendous opportunity, and we had a responsibility to our citizens. One of the very first decisions that we made in those initial conversations that we had following the fire was that we knew that we had to get our people involved. We knew that as a government, this was not something that we could do all alone. And after all, it was the people of Clarksville that make our town so unique and so charming. And we knew that the only way to be successful in this big endeavor that we were about to undertake was to collaborate and get the community engaged. So enter Carl Vinson. They came in, like Danny said, they helped us send out surveys in the newspaper, via social media, via emails. What do you want to see in Clarksville? We had town hall meetings. We had focus groups. We heard from churches. We heard from realtors. We heard from teachers, students, retired citizens, business and property owners. We heard from everybody. In our small town of 1,733 people, we heard the voices of over 800. That's a big deal to us. We had a motto, Clarksville Strong. I put this slide up because to cover up the burned side of the square, we had a lumber company donate the materials to make a huge mural, and we invited the community to come out and paint
paint flowers and smiley faces and everything to kind of make it a nice cover up sort of the dark side of it. We started to develop a master plan, and like Danny mentioned, we came up with short-term goals and long-term goals. Obviously, the long-term goal was to get our downtown rebuilt and back in business. But we had short-term goals that were going to be baby steps that were going to help us get to that point. Let's see. I mentioned that the fire gave us a huge opportunity earlier, and it allowed us the opportunity to look beyond the burnt side of the square and to focus on our downtown as a whole. We had lots of other projects that we needed to accomplish, lots of other small things that we could tackle in the meantime as we were working towards that long-term goal. What that would allow us was buy-in from the community. If we could prove that we were doing small things along the way, then we were going to gain their trust and we were going to continue to be motivated. So some of our small-term projects, we enhanced our visitor's guide. That was our restroom in our public park. The Eagle Scouts came in, they painted it for us. Who thinks about the restrooms in your public park? But we did. We have a river that flows through Habersham County. It's the beautiful Sequoia River, and it actually flows through our city park. We had the same lumber company that donated the materials for the mural also donated materials for this beautiful river viewing platform, and then we had volunteers come out and build this for us. We painted a mural on the side of a blank building. We installed outdoor speaker systems throughout our downtown that play music all day long, and it just enriches the pedestrian and the shopping experience for us. We had an old garment factory just outside of downtown, 1 block away from downtown. We condemned it. It is in the process of being turned into additional parking. We created new events to continue to bring people into our town to spend money locally, to shop in our stores and dine in our restaurants. All the while that we were doing these things, we were building the trust from our community. We were accomplishing, checking off things. I think we had 15 short-term goals in that 1 year in that master plan, and we knocked them all out. Let me just tell you that we continue to do these things. We continue to create projects for ourselves, and we continue to accomplish these things, even though the square has been rebuilt. I'll let Barbara talk about that, but this master plan, with the help of Carl Vinson, it has not sat on a shelf. It has been a very living and breathing document for us. It was crucial to helping us, but the other thing that was pivotal in this is the involvement of our people. It really, truly took a village to rebuild. I'm going to let Barbara Kiesler talk to you more about the long-term projects and how we got there.
Thanks, Mary Beth. Okay, so while the Main Street Board and Mary Beth were focused on rapidly accomplishing all of the short-term projects that we had come up with the Carl Vinson Institute's help, the mayor and council and I turned our attention to the long-term projects, mainly the restoration of the fire-damaged buildings downtown. Now, when we did our master plan, which was done in 2015, the plan said that we would be finished rebuilding downtown in 2 to 3 years. So we had to work in a hurry because Mary Beth was beating all the goals and we were going to beat the long-term goals too. We had several alternatives that had come up from our discussions with the public on how to do the rebuilding downtown. As it turns out, some of the things that we thought we might want to do weren't economically feasible to do, so we had to change things up, and I think I have a slide. This is at groundbreaking. You can see that there's a building, that building on the far left, that we had hoped to be able to build back, but it turned out we couldn't do that. That behind that facade is basically nothing. So when we went to look back at rebuilding that building, we found we had no structure on either side, which was a big disappointment and a big challenge that we had to face. And so because of our partnership with Carl Vinson Institute and also the Georgia Municipal Association, we turned to the Department of Community Affairs for some assistance. And we applied for a community development block grant to help us make those two walls structural, and we did receive that grant. They also helped us with some permanent financing as well through Georgia Cities Foundation and the Downtown Development Revolving Loan Fund. So we rocked along, we got a design, which was this here. We had a groundbreaking in early April of 2016. And we hired a local builder. We bid the project out. We hired a local builder to do the rebuild for us. And 1 year later, to the day, April 2017, we were having a ribbon cutting ceremony, and our project of rebuilding was done. And because we chose a local builder, 80% of the construction costs of doing this historic preservation were kept in our local community. In addition to this downtown rebuild, at the same time, the mayor and council had wisely decided that they wanted to work on a couple of the other long-term projects. Mary Beth mentioned the one project that you saw the picture of before, which was the old garment factory, had been a blighted property for over a decade in our town. We were able to acquire it, tear it down, and make additional downtown parking. Also, you can see in this picture, our sidewalks weren't looking too good. And we needed some new sidewalks in our square. So we were able to take care of that as well and redo the sidewalks and put up new LED fixtures that would make the city look better. I can't really describe to you the influence of the leadership of the Carl Vinson Institute of Government that they had on our community. We were confident, a confident community before the fire happened, and we were a hardworking community before the fire happened. But when Carl Vinson Institute came in, we sought the input of our citizens, and because we had successful projects, they trusted us. We earned their trust, and we have continued to work to keep that trust. But probably one of the biggest things that I learned from Carl Vinson Institute was confidence. We are a confident community now, and we got that confidence because of the plan that was developed and because Carl Vinson helped us do that plan. So we continue to, like Mary Beth said, create projects in our community and complete those projects. We had many partners. Oh, that's the plaza that took the place of that building that I told you was basically a shell. And it's actually become quite the focal point in our downtown. We had many partners in this project. The Department of Community Affairs, like I said, provided much of the funding. The Georgia Municipal Association provided information and assistance, especially right after the fire. Georgia Department of Community Affairs, like I said, I think I'm repeating myself now. So anyway, thank you for having us here today. Thank you for all that you do. And special thank you to Terry Rogers for your continued support and leadership in our community. And we'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Are there questions? Representative Rogers.
I think one of the things that, we've heard the thing that a picture tells us is worth 1,000 words, and it really wasn't, because what you were seeing was the front of that square. And what, I think Barbara made mention to it, if you guys could imagine, the building that caught on fire was behind, and it jumped across and it burned the entire back. If you walked into the thing, you were looking at nothing but sky and dirt behind there. And they came back and they saved the historical perspective of the whole thing and did a phenomenal job. And Carl Vinson just did a great job of bringing the whole community in. So I wanted to thank them for everything they've done. But it was a great project, very definitely a community effort.
One thing that I don't think any of us thought to mention is that the city had purchased all of those buildings from the current owners. And so that took us, what, a year and a half?
Yeah, it took us about a year to just obtain all of the property. She was saying it took, the city didn't own any of these buildings when the fire occurred, and so we had to negotiate with the building owners for about a year, is how long it took us to acquire the buildings so that we could do a historic preservation on the actual buildings. The building owners were underinsured. You know, if you have been to a small downtown, you know that 120-year-old buildings are difficult to maintain. And so it took us a while to acquire the buildings so that we could do the restoration.
The private owners after the renovations were done?
Okay, so we used historic tax credits as part of our financing package. It's a very long list of different financing that we use. So because we used historic tax credits, we have to hold on to them for 5 years. So we've had them for 2 years now, so we have 3 more years to go. One of the things I neglected to tell you is that before we were even done building the buildings, we had pre-leased 3 of the spaces. One was a restaurant, one was a retail space, and one was a residential space. And the restaurant and the retail space, when they opened, brought 17 of those 30 jobs that we had lost back to downtown Clarksville. One of the other spaces has since been leased to retail, and then we are hopefully just this close to negotiating with another restaurant. And another one of the spaces that we created below, we actually have an offer in right now. So if all that goes through, we'll only have 1 space that is empty of the 9 spaces that we created.
Back and putting the spaces down there with office, retail, and office in the back.
Okay. Let me go back just so you sort of have an idea of where. Okay. So the building on the end that has the striped awnings, when the fire happened, that building was empty. And it was one big 4,100 square foot space. And it had been empty for a couple of years. So we decided to make that 2,000 square foot spaces. And that building has a basement that also has 4,000 square feet in it. So we redid the basement spaces as well, split those as well. So there's now 4 spaces in that building where there was 1 space at street level and 1 space at the basement level. The next building was a restaurant before. It's a restaurant now. And there is an underneath basement space in that. This restaurant actually decided to go ahead and lease that space after a few months because they needed it for storage because their sales have vastly exceeded what their projections were for the first year there. And then the last building also has an underneath space, and that's where our residential space is on the 2nd story of that building. And then what the plaza did, the restaurant that caught fire is behind this, and it no longer exists. I mean, it was burned to the ground. 90% of it was burned to the ground. And so what we created back there was parking, and what the plaza does is it gives access via a set of stairs from the rear of these buildings up to our square, which is not something that we had before. Is that kind of what you wanted, Terry? Yeah. Okay.
Did you have any participation in the county as well? Or was it just totally the local community?
Well, probably more citizens from the county now are participating because we're in our comprehensive planning process. And this master plan that we have is really the cornerstone of our continued comprehensive planning. So we did have some folks from the county because we are the county seat. And we did have people from the county who were very interested in what was going to go on downtown. But we didn't have money from the county. No, sir. No financing from the county.
Was the community united before the fire, or did the fire actually bring the community together?
You know, I think we were united. We've always been a positive community. But in any small town, you're going to have some naysayers. And we had a handful of naysayers. Now we don't hear from them as much. I don't remember hearing from them at all since we've finished with this plan and we continue to go forward with these projects. We had 2 comprehensive plan community meetings at City Hall, and basically the message that we got from them was keep doing what you're doing. You know, you have a great vision, you know Clarksville's identity, so keep doing what you're doing.
Any other questions? I have one for Laura and Danny. Go up there with her, Danny. Looking forward, are there barriers that you see to doing this elsewhere? I see you've done it elsewhere, but I mean, would you have more opportunity if, whether it's legislative or whatever, that would, because, I mean, I like all the partnerships you've brought together. You've brought the Georgia Cities Foundation, there's DCA partnership, and, but in the process, do you see something that we can do that would make this go better, that would make it more something that you could replicate in other communities in the state of Georgia? Are there any kind of barriers out there?
Well, I don't know if Danny has some ideas on this. I would say we are replicating it, as you say, and so I think even though we take great pride in making this a very customized approach to every community we're in, it does have a pretty standardized process that we try to follow. So yes, we can do this in many more places. I guess the main drawback is, not drawback, but just hurdle, as you say, is just the amount of resources that we have at any one time. This is a very comprehensive process. It takes about 9 months, isn't that right, Danny, to put together a plan? And so it takes some time. So there's just any number of communities a given number of communities you can work with at a particular point in time. So it's really Danny and just a few folks on his team that do this work from our standpoint. But we do obviously join together with other partners. So it's really just a matter of resources and how many people we can apply to working around the state at any one point. Danny, I don't know if you have any other ideas.
One of the keys to all downtown development is always housing. So just when you're thinking about housing and how that affects, think about downtowns. It can be lodging. We heard about the success already here in the Blue Ridge area, the lodging and the motel hotel tax. And I'm also thinking about downtowns. You need beds and heads to be successful wherever you are. And so greater when we look around the state, I think that's going to be keys for our downtowns to continue to be successful in the future. On our capacity and what we do, just so you know, we start 3 of these a year in our partnership with GMA. And we use an application process. And right now, GMA announces it, but it's really word of mouth. So we're working with communities that are ready to take that leap, just like Clarksville that needed our help and needed our assistance.
Sharon?
So Clarksville has the mountain, and we went to Thomasville, which is, but what about the small towns that don't have your
I think what we do and what we always have to do is figure out what those assets are. You're not going to always have the mountains, or you're not going to have the coast, but you might have a technical school, you might have a certain type of industry, you might have a great chamber of commerce, every community. So we've worked all around the state. That slide that Laura put up trying to show different towns. So we've worked from Cairo, all the way up to Chickamauga. So what we do is, instead of figuring out what's missing, we try to figure out what do you have, what's maybe an underperforming asset, and tweak it and change it a little bit until that's a highly performing asset. And that's what we have to do in that process. When we come in and talk with people, they're our eyes and ears, and they're showing us, right, only if we could do this or this would happen. And so I rely on the local people to help us point out what those assets are.
Successes in very small.
Okay, since we're up in Northwest Georgia, I'll take a little Northwest example in Chickamauga, Georgia. Beautiful, quaint downtown. And in the planning process, something that came up was they also had a railroad train that came in, and they also had tourists coming from the battlefield, but they had no public restrooms and no place to host those people when they arrived. And so in the planning process, we worked with them, and we took a room in their historic depot, redesigned it, everything from paint color to furnishings, and then worked with the city. And luckily, a local foundation was involved in our planning process. When we gathered everybody, we made sure they were at the table, and they funded that. So before we left, that transformation started taking place, and now they have that, and they can host. So that's a great little example. Right up the road, we did a similar project in the city of Rossville. They had a pond right there, the duck pond, right? And they've recently restored that. Now, that was a group of local citizens that were engaged in the process that led it, and we helped them all, quietly with the master planning process and design recommendations. So just two little examples right here of implementation.
How about
Sure. Well, things I know about, still in touch with, and so in the City of Americus, we've been working with them. They've had some changeover in leadership, and that's always really important. But I know that they're working with their DOT right now to reconfigure the downtown so that you can have some angled parking, right? So it's coming online. It's not happened right away, but those are like those small little things, as well as signage and some other things into the gateway that we worked on when we were there.
Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a question that had to do with the historic tax credit, and mainly barriers that you might have run into, whether it's having to own the property before you can apply, the things that really slowed you down, and clearly a project that needed to be expedited. And you don't have to answer now if you'd like to catch me offline, but I'd like to know all of those barriers that you ran into.
Darlene?
Several public meetings, and I think that's probably where their College and Career Academy came from, which is now up and functioning. The building is done. But the streetscapes have allowed a couple of new businesses. They still have a ways to go. Their population's 9,000 plus, but it does work, but it's tough to get the citizens all on the same page. That's what I've seen as a hard part, and that happened to be a large growing Hispanic population. So there was people that wanted to go one way and people to go another way. To me, that's one of the hardest things, to get the naysayers and the people on the same page. But it has been helpful in Cairo.
Anybody else? Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
So as we stand here in a beautiful North Georgia winery, I think it is fitting that we talk a little bit about the winery business. And I know back in the 1980s, a fella by the name of Don Panos came to a little county in northeast Georgia and built what we had all thought he was losing his mind by doing, and built Chateau Alon. There were already a couple of other small vineyards and wineries around at that point, but that was one of the things that kind of brought the winery business in Georgia to the forefront. So as we have all seen as we ride through, especially northeast Georgia, and we're starting to see it around the state, we're realizing that wine is becoming a big business in Georgia, much as it did in California back in the late 1940s and early 1950s. And everyone sees and understands what California wines have done for the Napa Valley in that area. We're also seeing that same kind of thing happen in Georgia. And so we have a couple of folks to come talk to us today about that industry and about what is happening there. So I'm going to introduce them, allow them to come forward, and we'll do some question and answers as well. But Christina Ernst is the VIP, or heads up the VIP Southern Tours and VIP Wine Tours. And Larry Likens with Carter Cay Vineyards, who many of you have probably heard of Carter Cay Vineyards. And then our question and answer session will also include help from Bruce Cutler with the UGA SBDC, and with Kane Hickey, who is one of our newly minted, or vented, I guess, in this case, extension specialist for viticulture. So I'm going to ask Christina and Larry and everyone to come on forward, and thank y'all for being with us.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christina Ernst, and I own VIP Travel over in Sawtee, next to Helen, Georgia. And my background is tourism and hospitality. My parents actually, my dad immigrated over here from Austria in the late 60s and opened up the very first retail store in Helen. And so my mom's from Atlanta, and so I grew up in this unique home with my first language being German, but actually growing up here in North Georgia. And so being in Alpine Helen, I was always around other people and just grew to love being and working around people. I went to travel school in Atlanta and continued on to Georgia State, and I worked in multiple travel agencies before I moved back up to the mountains. And my first and I opened up a travel agency in 1996, which I actually still have. People still do walk into my travel agency from all over and book exotic destinations. And I've been lucky to travel myself. I've visited over 60 countries, and I've taken over 500 visitors across Europe. So where it leads to today is exactly 5 years ago, I met with our local White County Chamber representatives and other local business members in White County and local vineyard and winery owners. And we were all trying to come up with ideas. How do we promote tourism? How do we get folks into North Georgia? How do we get them safely from winery to winery? What can we do to make this industry grow? And that was a turning point to me. It was exciting to me hearing this whole new industry, or it's been around a while, but to really grow it with agritourism. And one night over a glass of wine, I'm like, why am I giving everybody all these ideas to create a unique product? Why am I not doing it? So I decided in that May of 2013, called out, looked around for buses, found my first bus with the oldest wine tour company, California Wine Tours, and had it brought back to Georgia. And I created a very unique product from my background, and that was an all-inclusive wine tour. So we pick you up wherever you are, your local accommodations or home. You go and visit 4 wineries in the local area. Right now, my specialty is the Unicoi Wine Trail. And we work with a local caterer for lunch. We do some shopping on certain tours. So we bring the entire community together. And it's in a safe way, getting them from winery to winery. The wineries are prepaid by my company, so they know exactly how many people are coming and when. They have a reservation, and it's just a fun day. So the business itself has really grown. When I started out 5 years ago, I had 50 people, about 50 people that came on that wine tour that very first year. Last year, 2,200 people came on my wine tour. So I came from one bus. And 3 weeks ago, I just purchased my 6th bus, and it is a panoramic bus, something you see in Alaska with the glass all the way around, very unique bus. And I also have 2 executive SUVs. So 2,200 people came last year on the wine tour, and I'm growing so fast this year that I've already had 1,700 people that are on the books through June. So I'm actually expecting to maybe double my numbers this year. It's really exciting for the growth of this industry and to see what's out there. So as a female entrepreneur, I definitely run into a lot of hardships or difficulties. And, you know, one of our main things is the cell phone infrastructure, mobile phone infrastructure. We have all these people that are coming on our wine tours for special events, birthdays, anniversaries, and they're like, you know, calls drop. For us, if we're running late, a bus driver's running late to another vineyard, we're running into so many holes and spaces where calls keep dropping. So that's a big issue for me, finding people that want to work as part of this exciting job, because we're not just transportation only, we turn it into a full day tour. So our goal is to bring these people back, have these people speak about us, have them learn about North Georgia, everything that they're seeing around them. And my goal is to continue growing. Outside of White County, we already actually on occasion come to this area, but it's a long day for our drivers. But I do test the waters in the surrounding counties with all the wineries. And so it's definitely a really fun business. And the SBDC has been very important for me in helping grow this business. Bruce Cutler has assisted me in a lot of different ways, and he actually visited me last week and found some nice little bit of money in our books that I wasn't aware of, so I was really glad about that. But they've been very instrumental in helping me grow. We found out about the SBDC through our local chamber, and I do feel for small businesses they are definitely a great asset. Definitely, for me, being a small business, I'm always trying to figure out ways to grow and expand. The people are coming. And what is so unique to me is the phone calls that we get. So we have turned our entire office and shifted our focus into marketing our local region. And people, I'm like growing up here, I'm so used to people saying, Helen, yes, I know about Helen, Georgia, and to people that are calling us, and we're like, yeah, you can stay right up the road in Helen and we'll pick you up, and people are like, what's Helen? And that's just so surprising to me, this whole new wave of people coming in and they're hearing about our vineyards. We had 2 people that found me online that came up for a week into Atlanta from Canada, and they came up to North Georgia just to do the wine tour. So it's really exciting to see this growth. I'm trying to figure out how to keep growing, and I'm glad to be a part of it. So thank you.
All right, hello. Okay, I'm Larry Likens from Carter Cay Vineyards, aptly following Christina there. Her van has been, or her bus has been over to my place a few times, as she says she does go outside of White County some. And the vineyards are an integral part of her business, as she just described. There are about 70 some odd wineries and vineyards in the state of Georgia now. And most of them are concentrated up in the north, central, northeast Georgia area. Here we're on the, I guess the western side of where most of them are, down to Ellijay and down into Pickens. That's kind of the western side of them until you get over towards Ringgold, where there's a big one over there. But yeah, definitely, tourism is a major part of what we do. Honestly, we wouldn't be able to survive if we didn't have the value-added product of wine and the tourists to come and drink our wine. I sell 95% of everything I sell from my tasting room, and most vineyards do. I'd say maybe 85 to 100%, depending on different people's business models. But the vast majority of all wine sold from Georgia Farm Wineries is from the vineyard, so that getting the tourists to our sites is very important. And it's great for the rural economy getting tourists up here and bringing them here, because they don't, as we all know, tourism compounds itself. Travel, motel, gas, all those fun things. So anyhow, I was brought here to talk a little bit about tourism, but also to talk about the UGA viticulture side of things. I am currently the past president of the Georgia Wine Producers, which is a statewide organization. And we formed in February of 2015. We became official, voted to ratify our bylaws, and we became official at that time. We hit the ground running, and one of the first things we wanted to do was get ourselves some expert help down here, because for so long we had been, when I say we, the vineyards, had been floundering in the state of Georgia with very little expert help. We had a few people who were assigned to us from UGA, but they had anywhere from 5 to 20% assignment on us. Most of their assignment was blueberries or apples or peaches, and we had to beg and plead for their help. And even then, when they did help us, they weren't experts, and they could only help us a little bit. So one of the first things we wanted to do as an industry was get ourselves some expert help, and with the help of Speaker Ralston, we ended up getting Kane Hickey down here, and he is a viticulturalist, and he is with UGA and has been since I think March of last year, so March of 17. He came on with us, got the funding in the legislative sessions of 16 with the help of Ross. We actually asked for 2 positions, an enologist, which is a fancy word for a person who's an expert in making wine, and a viticulturist, which is another fancy word for a person who's expert in grapevines. And politics being what they are, we got one instead of both, which is okay, because that was 100% improvement over what we used to have. So we're very excited to have Dr. Hickey here with us. He helps us with workshops. We have, I may be off my numbers, I think we've had 3 or 4 workshops this spring, all of them vineyard-centric, about spraying, what to spray, when to spray, pruning, how to prune, when to prune, different methods of pruning. And just to speak personally, I've always done one type of pruning because that's the type I knew and I was comfortable with. But Dr. Hickey had a workshop, and I learned, and I became more familiar and more comfortable with another kind of pruning, which I used this year. And not to get into too much detail about it, but I like it better. One of the reasons I like it better, it made my vines bloom out a little bit later, which helped me prevent some frost damage that we had. So there's some direct benefits that we're having from Dr. Hickey already. He's helped get some great speakers from other areas down here, and he's really helping our industry grow. I think when I opened my vineyard winery in 2008, there was approximately 22 vineyards in the state of Georgia. Now we're close to 70. So in 10 years, how much growth is that? That's 200% growth almost. Maybe that's a little exaggeration, 150% growth. So, and I only see us growing more. Vineyards I used to describe vineyard growth as coming in waves. There was a wave in the 80s when we had 2 come on. Then there was another wave in the 90s where we had 5 or 6 come on. And then early 2000s, there was another wave when I came on, about 8 or 10 of us came on. And we don't have waves anymore. We're just rolling and growing and expanding and moving. So it's really important, speaking from a vineyard standpoint, to have the help from University of Georgia and the help from our rural community, University of Georgia for the viticultural and the technical side of things, and also the SBDC, University of Georgia. They're helping a lot of vineyards coming on. A lot of vineyards coming on don't have a clue what's going on, how much things really cost. And I'll tell you, they cost a lot. Everything is stainless steel. Everything is grapevines from out of state. Everything is consultants. And, well, UGA doesn't cost us any money directly, but we got to have a lot of expert help, and it takes a lot of money. And so that's important, and the rural development side of it's very important. We got to have people coming in and tourism. And it's really important for our leaders to understand how important that tourism is and how important the vineyard industry is to our smaller communities to help get those people in. And I think, generally speaking, rural communities and governments are starting to understand and realize the impact that vineyards can have on their community. It's taken us a while to get past some blue laws. Taken us a while to get past some specific ways of thinking, but I think we're moving past that slowly but surely, as evidenced by our growth. Just speaking for my county alone, I was the first vineyard to open my county, planted in 2008. Now we have 6 vineyards in my county. 5 are operational. One's going to be more operational for too long. I should point out Mr. Gary Ingles here from my county, to come from Ingelheim Vineyards, to come help with us. And Michelle, and the swims up here, I believe they are the third one in this county, if I'm not mistaken. I think there's 3 in this county. And great thing about vineyards, generally, most of us help each other. Most of us want to see each other be successful. And a lot of that grew from us not having help when we first started. We'd have to call our neighbors and friends and say, have you seen this? Have you done that? And so we've got to develop a lot of relationships, which are also very important, having relationships with our vineyard friends as well. Okay? So just to summarize and finish up, I was only given, 7 or 8 minutes to speak. I do tend to speak a lot longer. I can, but I'll stop myself. But just summarize, UGA is very important. Their expertise they provide us is very important. Rural development side of it and is very important. Tourism. Got to have the tourism here. If we didn't have tourism, the vineyards wouldn't exist because, as I said, the vast majority of our sales come from directly at our farms. And that kind of relates back to lawmakers allowing us to do that. And if you don't, for those of you who are unaware, farm wineries have a lot of beneficial laws that help us do those things. The trick is getting our local governments not to pare those down and make them too restrictive. So, questions?
Chairman McCall.
Or mixtures, or
most vineyards up here are wine grapes, meaning we grow grapes to make wine, and most of the grapes we grow are either your traditional European type grapes, your Merlots, your Cab Sauves, or hybrids. Hybrids are a cross between an American variety and a European variety, because hybrids grow well here. They take on the best properties of the American grapes or the muscadines and the best properties of the European grapes, and they blend to work here. We're just high enough elevation so those European grapes can work here.
are y'all high enough to be away from Pearson disease? And that's a
Pearson's
problem we
disease.
have.
Yeah, Pearson's disease is a problem. It's a real big problem once you get south of Jasper, Gainesville line, that area, and even over, and once you get on the other side of Fort Mountain, which is kind of why this is the far west side. The reasons for that is the climate, the temperature. Where it's warmer, the bug that carries the Pearson disease can overwinter better, they can live longer, and they can do better. And up here, the cold will kill them off. 15 degrees seems to be a magic number that kills them off significantly. This year we had quite a few days under 15, so that was good for us. But Pearson disease is a real problem. There is a little bit of it here, but it's not a major concern as it is when you get south of that Jasper-Gainesville line. There are varieties being tested and grown that some we know are Pearson's disease resistant, some are growing and being tested to see if they are. And those are the varieties that are going to flourish and do really well south of that line. And as temperature increases up here, we may have to start planting more of them here if the climate continues on its upward warming trend.
I lost some grapes last year, and muscadines are fine, but I think it was Pearson. Is the reason I was asking if y'all are high enough elevation to.
Right, right. Muscadine, muscadines are an American grape. They grew up with Pierce's disease. They've learned how to combat, just through evolution, they've learned how to combat Pierce's disease growing up together. The European grapes that we bring in, they didn't grow up together, so they get more affected by it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
How many acres of cultivation do you have of grapes in your county?
In my county,
You said it was 5 vineyards now?
well, we have 6 vineyards, 5 operational.
Do y'all produce all the juice there, or do you have to import more juice to make your grapes?
Well, each vineyard, specifically, my vineyard has about 14 acres. I believe Ingelheim has something very similar. Is that right? About 14 acres. And we're 2 of the largest vineyards in our county. The other, I'd say on average, maybe 6 to 8 acres. So there's about 35 to 40 acres of vines in my county. And everybody has a little different model. Speaking personally, I produce all my grapes that make all my wine, because it's just my belief that, in my business model, that I want my vineyard to express the terroir of Southern Appalachia, and the only way to do that is use my grapes from my property, and that's how I like to do it. Terroir is a French word that means encompasses all the characteristics that are on your property that go into that bottle of wine. It's why a Merlot from my vineyard is going to taste different than a Merlot from Ingelheim, which is on the other side of the county, which is different than a Merlot from France. It's because the climate, the disease, the soil, all those fun things. Some vineyards do import grapes from within the state. I do sell grapes to other vineyards within the state because I produce more grapes than I make wine for. So I do sell grapes to other vineyards within the state. And other vineyards within the state, they'll buy my grapes, and they will also buy grapes from out of state. The state law is 40% of your grapes, if to be a Georgia farm winery, have to come from within the state of Georgia. Just speaking personally, mine are 100%. Some vineyards and wineries are right on that 40% line. So and this is just me speaking personally, I'd like to see us get to the technical ability and to the size where we can grow all our grapes and not have to import grapes from other places, and we can display our Georgia wines more. And a lot of that is our technical ability from UGA and our help from SBDC and the tourism coming up here and people being aware that we have good Georgia wine. Our main center being Atlanta. There's a lot of people in Atlanta that drink a lot of wine, and that's where most of our people come from. So that's our main target area. But Chattanooga, they come from Chattanooga. We've seen a great influx of people from Montgomery, Birmingham areas of late, also Jacksonville as of late. So I think some stuff that the state is doing, targeting those areas, is helping us as well.
All right, y'all, if we can hold up right here for questions for just a minute, and allow Bruce and Kane to come up and make a few comments. And then we're going to ask Larry to stay up, and then ask Miss Christina to come back up as well for Q&A, kind of inclusive of the whole topic. So,
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Bruce Cutler from University of Georgia Small Business Development Center. Thank you for having us out here today for this session, and I want to thank Christina. She's been a great client to work with. Really, she's worked with SBDC since the beginning of her company and is a good illustration of the kind of help that SBDC can offer this industry and similar industries. So anything from, we did a lot of work with her on her finances. She had really big decisions to make about lease versus purchase of her buses, for example. Those buses are expensive pieces of equipment, so that was the kind of big decision for her small business that she consulted with us on. So a lot of financial advice, also marketing advice as she's broadened her reach, across different target market segments and that type of thing. And one other comment I just want to emphasize, a couple of the other speakers alluded to it, but one of the reasons that we have focused on the wine industry is because of the economic ripple effect that it has up here in North Georgia in particular. So I think you all received a handout about the Wine Business Conference, which is now becoming an annual event that we sponsor and host. And not everyone who comes to that is a vineyard owner or winery owner, because this industry is actually very broad. You have retail associated with it, shops and stores. You have the tasting rooms associated with it. You have some restaurants. You have lodging. You have value-added products because they sell their grapes or their wine into people who use it to make other kinds of food, like jellies and jams and preserves, for example. So then you have companies like Christina's that do tours. So it has one of those domino effects in terms of economic development. And so I think our support for that, both from SBDC side and the College of Agriculture, is helping to continue those waves to move out and just overall economic growth to happen.
All right, my name is Kane Hickey. I am the Viticulture Extension Specialist at UGA. Glad to be here today. How many have drank Georgia wine? That is a fair number of hands. I think that's the highest percentage ever in a room. That's great. So thanks for your support. Please continue to support it. Larry might have alluded to this a little bit. Growing grapes is not intuitive, especially in the Southeast. You can plant a vine in Paso Robles, California, and you can almost walk away from it. Sans the training and tying and things like that. But the climate pretty much takes care of the rest. Here in the humid Southeast, it's not as intuitive. There's all sorts of complications that our climate, and challenges, I should say, that our climate can bring on. Now, does that mean that it's impossible? No, it's not impossible. As Gary said, he has 10 acres. Gary Engel, who's in the room from Ingelheim, has 14 acres, and there's a lot of growers who have more than that. So it's not impossible, but it's challenging. But when I got here, I thought that it was a great opportunity for me to help people overcome those challenges and hold technical workshops, like Larry said, through pruning, through implementing better spray programs, through choosing cultivars more wisely. So someone over here asked it about Pierce's disease, and good on you for knowing what that is. You can get by that with planting different cultivars. Who's heard of Blanc du Bois? Yeah, the two people that grow grapes. Okay, okay. So that is a very Sauvignon Blanc-esque grape. Who's heard of Sauvignon Blanc? More. Yeah, sure. But Blanc du Bois can grow in the Piedmont of Georgia. It can grow outside of Atlanta. And it produces wines very akin to Sauvignon Blanc. So I guess what I'm getting at is there's ways to overcome these challenges just through cultivar selection. It tolerates Pierce's disease and produces a beautiful wine. One of the challenges is getting folks in the metro Atlanta area to respect that, because we're so, in the wine industry, folks are so tied to names like Cabernets, Merlots, Chardonnays, and things like that. And so thankfully, it's not my job to tell people what to do and how to spend their money. I'm just a scientist trying to help people grow the best grapes they can on their land, and I think we're succeeding. But one of the challenges I do see is folks getting on board with what we can do in this state and being proud. I'm not apologetic, and I don't think Larry or Gary are apologetic about what we can do. We're proud about it, and we produce a lot of good stuff. So I'm here. I'm glad to be here, and I've been here since March, and just feel right at home helping folks out here. They've been very, very receptive and supportive of us. And moving forward, I just think we're going to keep on growing. Like Larry said, it's more like a continuous growth now. I held a new growers workshop strictly geared towards people that were interested in planting new vineyards or opening a new winery back in August last year. I expected maybe 20 or 30 people show up. I think we had 60 people show up at that. Now, educating all these people about the challenges that we have in the region I expect maybe 10 or 15% of the people that showed up to actually carry on through. But that's my job, is to let people know that this is a capital-intensive, challenging business to get into, and it's my job to let them know of those challenges. Not to scare them away, but just be honest with them and tell them the truth. So the people that do end up going forward with it, they're in it for the long run. So yeah, I'm glad to be here, and thank you for this opportunity. So if y'all have any questions, fire away.
I'm going to ask Christina and Larry both to come back up too, and we'll take a few minutes worth of questions here. Darlene, I think I didn't miss you a while ago.
How long does it take for a vineyard or the vines to mature enough to produce grapes?
Good question. So the question was, how long does it take for the vineyard to mature enough to produce a commercial crop? And someone said, who stole my thunder? 3 years, I heard. Yeah, we say 3 years, but in practical purposes, it's 4 years. And that's one of the practical challenges, is when people say, I say, hey, in 4 years, you'll get a commercial crop. That's if you spray your vines right. That's if they don't get frostbitten or killed back by frost. So there's a lot of these ifs, so it's not guaranteed. But if all things go well, 4 years.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mostly to Larry, if I can, and any of your colleagues. Back in 2008, I believe you had just passed the farm wine bills that allowed you to ship. We then followed up a little bit with Merlot to Go and some other things. Can you talk about any of those things and how it might have changed your industry?
Sure. Well, the farm winery bill's been through a couple different phases. It was originally, I think, 1980 was when it was originally authored and came through. The being able to ship has helped. Some wineries have taken advantage of that and ship multiple places. Just speaking personally, I ship within the state of Georgia, working on shipping to Florida. It's a little bit intensive with the paperwork, because if you're going to ship to another state, you have to get a license in that state. Most states now have reciprocal agreements with the state of Georgia, not all, but most states do. So that is helpful. The other parts of the farm winery bill are helpful. We're also allowed to be our own wholesaler. That's very helpful. That also presents some paperwork challenges and some other things, but we can push through that and get by it. Being able to distribute our own wine is paramount, because especially with our local food movement, there's a restaurant wants to sell local stuff and do local stuff. We can distribute that to them. I'm sure everyone, our lawmakers, are familiar with the 3-tier system, and it can be tough to get a boutique wine to compete with a $10 bottle of wine from California when the distributor is trying to sell it to a grocery store or a liquor store or especially a restaurant. Those are the toughest ones. So yeah, when we can go out and sell our own product and we grow, I grow my wine, I make my wine, I can go out and I can talk about my wine to these vineyard to these wineries and package store people and get them excited about it. So I do my own distributing, and most of my stuff is within an hour of where my vineyard is, 90% of it. I do distribute a little bit in Athens, and that's because I went to school there. And also because my mom lives there, it gives me a chance to go visit her, so that works out for me. But yeah, those are great things. Being able to be our own wholesaler, being able to ship, being able to sell on site, and we encompass all parts of that. And that bill really allows us to do that, and it's very beneficial to farm wineries to be able to do that. Thank you.
One thing I wanted to add, with Beeline Vineyard, we also ship to about 35 states. We have a distributor that we use, in our distributor, that we're shipping all over the state of Georgia, and now we have the capability to ship to about 35 states because of a lot of the legislative actions that's occurred that allows us to be a farm winery. There's things that
Sam?
And you said you're the only specialist in the state?
No, there's plenty of specialists. I'm the only wine grape specialist.
Right, for wine grapes?
Yep.
Because that was my main question, as I know, and I think he touched on it a little bit. We've got a lot of grapes all over the state.
Oh.
And I know in South Georgia, I know where 40 acres of grapes are, and I know they've been trying to get a specialist to help them out, and I know there's a need for that in other areas of our state. Is that correct?
I think it is. Please tell that person to call me. Yeah, so I am here. While I think it wouldn't be wrong to say that it was the beating of the drums and the bushes of the northern Georgia folks that eventually got me here, the Muscadine folks I've been working with a lot too. So as you suggest, I have to cover a lot of ground, and I do work with, like the Polk Vineyards down in Irwin County and Still Pond Vineyards down in Calhoun County. So yeah, as you suggest, I am helping folks down there. I wish I could have a quarters down there to help them a lot more too.
Well, I drove up here this morning, and it's a long way, so that's why I asked that question.
Yeah, definitely helping those folks out too, though. Thanks.
It's for Larry. It's good to see you again. We enjoyed the tour. We went there last year. But following on what Chairman England said, are there things that you see in the business side that we can do legislatively or we need to change to make it easier for y'all to be, for that business to grow?
Yes, sir. The first and foremost thing would be Department of Revenue. I don't mind paying taxes, but today is the perfect day to talk about this. Today is the 15th of the month when all our excise tax reports are due and all our alcohol reports are due. You're asking about wholesaling. I have to file a wholesale report, a shipping within the state report, a winemaking report, and each one of those has an excise tax associated. Well, the winemaking has an excise tax associated with it. Each one of those has a sales and use tax associated with it. I don't, and then that's on top of our normal stuff of payroll tax and normal sales and use tax. I don't exaggerate when I say today, this morning, I worked really hard so I get here on time. Today, this morning, I have 12 or 13 different Georgia Department of Revenue accounts so that I can run my farm winery. And it is challenging to say the least. There's a lot of things that can be done to streamline that, and I'd really like to see Department of Revenue be more helpful with that. And I know they're the definition of bureaucracy, and they take their direction from y'all, the elected leaders, and that's where we need help is helping streamline those things.
I don't know if they take direction from us sometimes.
Sometimes. Yeah, I'm always, there's some challenges there. I'll give you a quick example, wholesale license. To get a wholesale license as a farm winery in the state of Georgia, you have to be denied, as a producer, you have to be denied by an established distributor. So if Carter Cave Vineyards wants to become a wholesale distributor, I have to get a letter from Crown or whoever it may be saying we don't want to carry your product. At that time, I can then apply to become a wholesaler with the state of Georgia. Now, these wholesalers, for the most part, don't want to mess with small vineyards. One reason we're small, they don't really see us being a problem, or they see us being competition and they don't want to give us the letter. So us wineries being, to tell on ourselves a little bit, found ourselves a little loophole, and couple of the wineries had been approved through this arduous process, and we figured, hey, you're a wholesaler, Mr. Winery, write me a letter. So they started writing us letters, so we got a bunch of us through doing that, but then the Department of Revenue said, we don't like that gray area, and they closed it, and so now we're back to doing what we had to do. And this it's a dance that we have to play with the Department of Revenue, and that's just one of the many, many examples of the things we have to do to exist as a Georgia farm winery. It's very challenging.
Thank you.
thinking. Would it be fair to say that the reports that you have to file are based on the fact that under the three-tier system, it's, in most cases, the wholesaler, the ultimate retailer, and the grower, if you will, are all three different people, so that's why they've got three different reports, and yet they make you fill all of them out even though you only pay the excise tax once, pretty much?
Yeah, and that's the genesis of the problem. But for example, the farm winery report we have to fill out presently has all that information on it. It has the wholesale information on it. It has the retail information on it. It has the TIB transfer and bond. If I take some of my wine and sell it to Gary, I can do that through a transfer and bond. It has all of that information on that. So we fill out that report, and then we have to go back and fill out the other reports as well. And just to tell how we do it and make that work and maneuver around Department of Revenue again, all those other reports I just fill out as zero reports, or else I'm paying double tax. So that's how we maneuver around that. And that, and outside looking in, that if something could be done to say Georgia Farm Wineries, all you gotta do is fill out this one special report that has been created for Georgia Farm Wineries, and not these other reports, that would be helpful. And I assume that's a direction that the Department of Revenue needs to be given by lawmakers. I assume that's, I don't know exactly how that works.
We can do
that. Anyway, yeah, it's tedious, but it does all come from us being a three-tier system. That's where it all stems from. Yes, Gary.
If you look at some of the other states, such as Virginia, who has a large wine-producing community in Virginia, there's probably 1,000 wineries up in Virginia or so. They've developed capabilities to assist their grape industry with marketing, with a number of different things. And so there's some innovative ways that some other states, Missouri's doing it as well. If I buy grapevines from California, for example, there's a grapevine commission fee that I pay to California when I do that. Of course, California likes to tax everything, so that's just the rule there. But Virginia has developed some capabilities. North Carolina, I think, has too. And it might be good to look at some of the other states and what they're doing to help these industries out. And if you look at this, Georgia before Prohibition was about, I've heard rumors, the fourth to sixth largest producer of grapes in the United States before Prohibition. We ripped them out starting in about 1911, didn't plan to start planting again until the late 70s. The industry's coming back. It's a growth opportunity for the state of Georgia. And so I think there's just a lot of opportunity we look at. And like Larry said, use some common sense to help us out. Because at the end of the day, we're just farmers. So we appreciate it.
Yeah, and what I'd like to add, that the Georgia Wine Producers is a statewide organization, and that is the organization that we as an industry started in February of 15, and we did that to work on these problems and to speak with one voice and to work towards that. So we realize that it has to be a joint an effort from our industry to push forward that, and that's what the Georgia Wine Producers is, and that's where we're moving with them, trying to do those things. So if any of you want to work on that or contact us, the Georgia Wine Producers are the people to work towards that. And I can help you with whoever you need to talk to in there.
All right, we got time for one more question. Anyone? Tom?
Is or no, not at all. Is labor to do pruning and harvesting a problem to find for y'all up here?
Yes, if I can only use one word.
Well, I mean, I wasn't cutting you off, but
yes, labor is a problem. It is a labor-intensive job. It's farming. Right. Make no mistake. You're out in the sun. You get rained on. You get snowed on. And there is some skill involved in it, but it's a skill that can be learned in a relatively short amount of time. One season, you should be able to become proficient at it. The problem is it's farm labor, so the like, I have high turnover in my farm labor, and generally speaking, my farm labor is relatively young. Right now, between the ages of 19 and 25 is my farm labor. And they'll stay with me a couple years, and they'll probably move on to do other things. So yes, it is hard. It is hard to do.
Residents or migrants?
I have full-time U.S. citizens that born and raised here. For harvesting, I bring in migrants to do that. And to speak frankly, this year was hard to find migrants because of all the deportation that's occurring. The migrants are scared to leave what they know because they're getting deported. And so using migrant labor is challenging. And to find enough people to harvest and do what you need to do in a short amount of time. For me to harvest, if I'm going to harvest in the right amount of time, I need about 40 people for a day. And that can be difficult to find 40 people on a Tuesday that can do that. So it is another challenge, yes.
What is your window for harvest? So you check sugars, everything's good to go. How long do you have to get that grape off the vine?
Okay, well, generally speaking, September is harvest up here in the mountains. That's harvest time. And usually when you decide it's time to pick, usually within 3 days, you need to get those grapes off. That can change if there's a hurricane coming. We all know September's hurricane season. That can change real fast, hurricanes coming, and a few other factors. But if you decide on Monday you need to harvest that grape, you need to get it off in the next couple of days to get what you want.
Okay. All right. Well, thank y'all very much. We appreciate y'all being with us this afternoon.
Thank you.
We're going to take a short break. Please be back in your seats by 3:20.
Hello. All right, everybody, let's take our seat. Take our seat. All right, let's take our seat. Come on. Penny Houston, Sam Watson, Rick Jaspers, sit down. Please. Okay, everybody. In the next segment of discussion, we're going to be talking, and here's the topic, small cell technologies use of and compensation for rights-of-way. And this is in direct response to a urging resolution that Chairman Meadows introduced and passed out of the House for this group to study small cell technology and basically the issues, and it's a complicated subject, but basically the issues are streamlining the permitting process, access to rights-of-way, and the compensation. And so I will ask the presenters to address those particular issues. We are not here to talk today about pole line attachment agreements, FCC rates, or any of those things. We're talking about small cell technology and the use and compensation for rights-of-way. Our first presenter is Alan Bell with Georgia Power. Thank you for being here.
Because this issue is important to us. I'm the joint use manager for Georgia Power, and when someone from the pole industry says they're in joint use, it has nothing to do with the legalization of marijuana. It has to do with what is attached to our poles. I've also been fortunate enough to serve on the Broadband Deployment Advisory Committee with the Federal Communications Commission for the last year, where we have been addressing these exact issues. And I wish I could tell you there was a silver bullet, but several states have passed legislation. Some states are struggling with the legislation they passed. A lot of states are in the same boat as Georgia, that they tried once and they're going to have to try again. So you are not alone in trying to address this issue. Georgia Power has a long history of communication deployment. And communication industry using our poles. It goes all the way back to what we refer to as the joint use agreements, which is the agreements between the telephone industry and the electric industry. And what a joint use agreement is it's a pole sharing agreement. We agreed to a certain size pole, how much space each person would have on the pole, what the share of ownership would be of the poles, and we developed a contract for that. There was no regulation associated with that. It was two companies coming together and reaching a negotiated settlement. That's been in place for 100 years, and I would say that was probably a key to telephone being deployed all over the country. And it has been very effective in the deployment of broadband recently, because the telephone industry has 3 feet of reserved space on the poles, and they're able to do it. So the cable industry came along about 1970. We've been working with them. The FCC got involved mainly because the cable industry and the telephone industry didn't get along so well, and so Congress had to get in and force access to the poles. We got caught in that. So we have been working, with the cable industry for about 40 years through the Federal Communications Commission and regulated deployment, as opposed to the unregulated, with the telephone companies for years. In 1996, the Telecom Act came along. That was competitive telephone when, the Bell system broke up. We've been doing that for about 20 years. And then recently, fiber attachments have come depending on what the definition of net neutrality is at the Federal Communications Commission, that's either regulated or unregulated. Today it is not regulated because of the decision they've made on net neutrality. But we have had some large deployments, along those lines. And when Google came to town, they were unregulated. We sat down and we agreed to a pole attachment agreement with them without the influence of a regulatory agency. So at times, our poles get a little congested, as a result of all the communication people that want to attach to our poles. This is just the communication part. This is a picture that was taken during the Google deployment. And now, of course, we want to do small cells. You can see, the trash can looking thing at the top, that is what a small cell is. There's also, it's not in this picture, but on this particular one, there's about a 2 cubic foot box associated with that, referred to as the ancillary equipment. Small cells are a step down from macro cells. Macro cells are what's on the towers. A small cell is necessary to hit the areas that the macro cell does not hit. When 5G is deployed, they know that they're going to need a significant number. You've probably all heard the numbers. They have 300,000 now. They're going to need 600,000 by a certain year. So they're going to need a significant amount of deployment of small cells. And of course, they look at the right-of-way and they see these poles that are already there and they say, hey, well, what if we use those? So, but this particular deployment will be a little different than a forced deployment. And the reason that'll be the case is because the electric industry, as well as local governments, need broadband for economic growth. You could argue whether you needed cable service for economic growth or not, and that may have been part of the problem. But we know that in the areas of the state that are struggling, if they don't have broadband, they're going to continue to struggle. So we are very anxious to get broadband deployed to rural areas of Georgia that we serve. And with that, and we understand that it has to be co-location. We're on the right of way. We're willing to make a certain number of our assets available for that deployment, and we've been doing it. We probably have about 300 small cells, most of those in the metro Atlanta area, that we've done in the last 5 years, I'd say. So we're already doing that. We're working with people like New Singular Wireless and Crown Castle, and it's spelled Mobility. We call them Mobility just so they don't get confused with the other one. But a lot of the large people that you've heard, that are very interested in this, that they are already actively deploying their small cells on our infrastructure. We have an incentive to negotiate. So unlike, that maybe we had to be drugged to the table when the cable industry was being deployed, that's not going to be the case. We're anxious for these facilities to get on our facilities as well. Now, does that mean it's open arms, come wherever you want? No. But obviously, our number one concern is, the reliability of our system. And we're going to make sure that that's priority number one. And then, if we can make our assets available, that's what we're going to do. In the last session, we had some safety concerns, both dealing with the deployment on the right-of-way and on some particular electrical issues we were concerned about. And both the authors of the bill and the industry heard our concerns, and they made changes, and we appreciate that. We also realized after a certain point that this could be leading to sort of double regulation. We are already regulated by the FCC. We figure one agency is enough. So we asked to be exempted from the bill, and we appreciate having the exclusion in that. So we're going to continue, to ask to be excluded, but don't take that as that we're not interested in the issues. We're very interested because we work along the right-of-way with all the people that we're dealing with. We co-locate already with the authorities, the electric authorities around Georgia, the EMCs around Georgia, the other phone companies around Georgia. So whatever rules affect them, in the end, could affect us as well. So with that, you have any question? Or is that enough detail, Mr. Chairman, about the 5G deployment?
Are there questions? Don?
Thank you, Chairman. You had a slide, there that says, and none of us want heavy-handed regulation. Nobody wants that, but you got a slide there that says no heavy-handed regulation should be necessary. But I think, and none of us want heavy-handed regulation, but I think what you're referring to, as far as just what you're talking about, your electric power poles and co-location on them. That's what you're just talking about that.
Well, I guess when we go to the FCC and we're advocating our position, we're asking for light touch regulation as opposed to, right now they tell us how much we charge a foot, how many days we have to do the permit, and just right on down the line. I hear a lot of people saying that they want to force us to have a database of available assets. A lot of those things happen when there's an incentive for the person with the infrastructure to be involved. And if you're forcing the rate down to the lowest rate possible, then those kind of things don't happen. So the Broadband Deployment Advisory Committee has put together a municipal code that does just sort of outline an idea of what a municipal code would look like for deployment. It lists the different types of rates that could be used. It doesn't specify what the amount is. It lists the other things that need to be considered in terms and conditions on a right-of-way. That would be the type of light touch regulation as opposed to forcing everything.
But from your presentation, you were just talking about when you say no heavy-handed regulation. I said you're only talking about, you don't want to see anything related to Georgia Power and any kind of regulation, any heavy-handed regulation as far as rates for co-location on your poles. I mean, you're not getting into the other parts of it.
Well, that's correct, but it's our experience that if there's an opportunity for the two parties to reach an agreement, that is the best possible. If one party is being forced to do it, similar to what we were done in the cable industry deployment, I mean, you type in Southern Company versus the FCC, and you see a whole lot of Supreme Court cases as a result of that regulation. It was a constant battle, a constant fight. I don't think that is in the best interest of anybody. I think that if you allow the two parties some room to get to negotiate, then that's what our experience is better for everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Matt?
You said that most of the 300 small cells that y'all had co-located were in metro area. Have you had any in what we would consider rural parts of the state?
Not that I'm aware of. Understanding, of course, Georgia Power predominantly serves the cities, but we do have some rural areas, and I know we have a few in Savannah. I'm not aware, even the second tier cities, we haven't even started to hit that really hard on our assets.
Anybody else? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, Darrell Ingram, Electric Cities of Georgia.
Darrell Ingram with Electric Cities of Georgia. Some of you may or may not be aware of the electric cities. There are 52 communities in the state that have been in the electric business. Most of these are in rural Georgia. You can see that some are in the metropolitan Atlanta area, but they run from the Tennessee line to the Florida line and Alabama to South Carolina. So the majority of our cities are in the rural part of the state. These communities have been in the electric business for over 100 years, and we've had many of our pole attachment agreements up to 90 and 92 years. That some of these pole attachment agreements that we're still working off of obviously have been modified. And of course, now with small cell coming into the mix, it creates a different dynamic. One of the things that we have done is created statewide model agreements, and we're doing that currently for small cell, and are currently in negotiations with AT&T and MCI for this new technology. Of course, it will create some challenges on the pole, but we do think it's manageable. You know, from an electric standpoint, we see really this new small cell, new technology, and fiber, all the above, much like we do the Eisenhower interstate system. We, as electric utilities, we have to grow, and that's why we're so engaged in statewide economic development. And so we support this technology as it moves forward. What we have done is put assets in place on staff that utilizes the co-location agreements, the new agreements, code enforcement, permitting, and we utilize a program called the National Joint Use Notification System. This is a national system that we use. It's an industry standard, and so we anticipate using this also for small cell technology. Basically, what happens when the permitting is done and information, all the processes happen, then we use this notification system for all utilities that are on the pole to notify them of what's on the pole, or when to, or if they need to get off the pole. So there is a process in place that we utilize now, and we really view this as a business to business. We've been doing this for quite some time, and just as Alan spoke, you know, our main priority for the electric distribution system is electric distribution, but we understand co-location is important. For example, if you look at the pole, pick the photo of the pole, there are several different utilities on that pole. Well, now a small cell needs to fit on that pole. And so that does come with some challenges, but we do think it's manageable to be able to make that work for all carriers to be on the pole. But these joint use agreements really provide the consistency, predictability, remedy, and operational efficiency for all parties that are on the pole, even with small cell coming in, because congestion is a problem. I'm going to skip through some of this. So as a small cell comes on, the information that we received from AT&T is that the 4G LTE has a spacing requirement between 500 and 1,200 feet. And then the anticipated 5G has a spacing requirement of 250 to 750 feet. That means these antennas, that's the spacing that they have to be. When you look at a municipal pole, typically the spans are between 125 and 175 feet. Now that varies. When you're in high density areas, like in municipals, you're going to have smaller spans. When you're in rural areas, those are going to be longer spans, right? So this all plays into it. From our perspective, it looks like that from every 3 to 6 poles for one carrier, that they're going to need an installation if they only use electric utility poles. Of course, there could be other options that they could put the small cell placed with. But when you start looking at adding on all of the carriers that are deploying small cell technology, then obviously it becomes a little more complicated. And that is one of the reasons why we think that we continue with small cell with these same joint use agreements. And the agreements that we have with the 52 municipalities, ECG created a model agreement for all utilities, all of the 52 municipal utilities, to use the same agreement. And that again provides consistency, predictability, and the rates are consistent for across the state, which makes it simpler. And I know in working with some of the telecom carriers and cable TV, they've applauded our efforts in having these statewide agreements. So bottom line is we've been working with this process for quite some time. Again, this was actually an agreement for the Marietta Board of Lights and Water for the city of Marietta, and that was 92 years ago. That agreement is still active. Of course, they've updated it now to today's standards. But I guess the other point for the committee to understand is that as this new technology emerges, you know, what's next? What becomes behind small cell? And also the technology on the electric utility system. We are continually innovating our system with innovation that's on the pole. And so we've got to have the ability to manage that asset, and we view the pole the same as an asset, just as a substation or a transmission line. So we have to have that ability not to be dictated of where these things go, and that's why by having these agreements, business-to-business agreements, we feel like that are already in place, that they work well. So I'd be glad to, Mr. Chairman, to answer any questions you might have.
All right, you say that you think business-to-business agreements will suffice and that there is no need for legislation? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So why, if everybody's negotiating and everybody's playing nice and singing Kumbaya, why was there legislation that was aggressively pursued this year?
That's a good question.
Well, I mean, did you have agreements that everybody was happy with?
We thought we did.
On small cell technology?
So we're currently in negotiations. We did not with small cell. So when small cell came out in basically a firestorm, it would seem from the electric side that the telecoms really wanted to make this happen quick. We get that, we understand that. But yet there's processes we have to go. We did not have processes in place. So when the session, after the session got started, we reached out to the telecoms and said, let's start negotiating to include small cell, because it's a different technology. It's going to need to have different needs.
Let me ask you this. As I understand it, the first small cell bill was introduced 2 years ago, and you're telling me that maybe when you saw that it was going to move, that's when y'all started negotiating?
We really started this year on negotiating with small cell.
But it was introduced last year, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Second question is that there were, as I understand it, there were three main issues with the small cell bill. There was who's going to control the right-of-way, streamlining the permitting process, and the cost of attachment. So please address all three of those from the Electric City's perspective.
Well, we have a process in place right now for streamlining the process.
Okay.
We have a single point of contact in place that basically works on behalf of all 52 of our electric utilities to help streamline the process, which includes part of the permitting. You know, we're used to permitting. We're doing that now with existing technology. So basically it would be a same process. As far as cost, we have not done what we're typically used to doing with our existing technology is on a per foot basis of use of the pole. We use a negotiated rate that's usually around $16.50 per pole. It's different for cable than it is for telecom, and there's reasons for that. We use a negotiated rate which uses 26.5% of the pole. So they're picking up a piece of that cost of that pole. It's not, and a lot of times we hear, like when you talk about the FCC rate, the FCC rate uses 7% of a 37.5-foot pole. And it's a sound algorithm. We use the similar algorithm, but we're using it at 26.5% of the pole. And so that's how our costs are derived at 26. Actually, I'm mistaken, we're 20% of the pole. The APP model, which is American Public Power Association, their standard is 26% of the pole. When we negotiated the statewide agreements in 2006, we lowered the cost. Some of our utilities' costs went up, some of their costs went down. We got a flat rate that they could use across the board.
All right, what about control of the rights-of-way?
Well, we don't control the right-of-way. From our perspective at Electric Cities of Georgia, we're just the poles. And so the city itself has a right-of-way issue. We consider that as a GMA to work on that issue in terms of right-of-way.
As I understand the legislation as it evolved this past year, even though it applied to municipalities, there was an exception or a carve-out for the electric utility that might be owned by a municipality. Is that correct?
The carve-out, as we read it, was the co-ops. The EMCs had a carve-out which would not be in the legislation, but the cities were left in the legislation.
Okay, so the cities, not only light poles, but also power poles were covered under the legislation.
That's correct. All poles owned by the utility, and so our request to the legislature was that we be treated fairly as with the co-ops, and then continue with our business-to-business agreements.
All right, one of the horror stories that we heard as this legislation progressed last year were that some cities or some areas were like charging thousands of dollars to set a pole, and part of the genesis of this legislation was to control cost and allow or disallow price gouging. Would you address that?
I'm not aware from the electric standpoint of the electric poles where there was any price gouging. We understand and support the deployment of broadband, so I'm not aware of any price gouging associated with an electric utility pole. If there were any others related to right-of-way, I'm not aware of those.
Okay. Other questions? Don?
Related to that last question, you're only speaking from the electric cities, from the power poles in the cities that you're only speaking from the electric cities standpoint. I think you said this, but you're not speaking as far as the municipalities themselves. That's a different issue. The prices that they were demanding really had nothing to do with your organization.
That is correct. Okay. That is correct.
Darlene?
I was a little confused by some of the legislation too, because especially with the right-of-way, I have a historic downtown, and most of our power lines are underground, and it came up, well, are they going to attach something to our pretty light pole? And they didn't want to disturb how it looked downtown. And that was a concern that we had. Will you have access anywhere you want in that right-of-way? Even it's not a standard utility pole, but they would have been able to attach one of these devices in the middle of a historic district. That was one of the concerns that I had, and I don't know what the answer is. Was that included, or it was not, or was it even addressed?
Well, if I'm in the telecom business, I'm going to want to try to get as much coverage as I can and attach to whatever I can, right? As electric utilities, we own some of those electric light poles. We would like to have the ability to, through the permitting process, to work with that utility to say this works or this does not work. And then there could be other options for them on a private sector or either on a building or some other thing that may or may not work. Again, it depends on what, there's a lot of different factors. It's not just an antenna. There's other pieces of equipment that go with that. So, and I'm not familiar with all, some of the legislation mentioned a 26 cubic foot, having the ability for a 26 cubic foot panel. I really don't think that they're doing that. I never understood why they wanted to have that big of a box available to install. And that you would have to ask them. I don't know, Ms. Taylor.
Thank you.
Today that there are no small cell in any of your cities?
We've had
on your poles. Sorry.
We have had about half a dozen applications. Most of those have been in with our Metro Atlanta cities, but I think we did have an application for Fort Valley, but it was one of the very tall towers for small cell, which is apparently a different use than the smaller small cell. But we've had about a half a dozen. And I'll be the first, when I talk to our folks about were those approved, and they were not approved because what they were asking and what they submitted was not complete information. And so we're working on that process right now so that we can better work with them. Because again, we want the deployment of this technology from an economic development standpoint. So we're getting processes in place to make it work better.
Ed?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm the last person who wants to regulate anybody, but I get a lot of different entities, whether it's cities or polls or Georgia Powers or this or that, and we talk about negotiating fairly, treat us fairly, don't dictate. How long should we wait for y'all to get in the room and bring us language that everybody's happy with? What's a reasonable amount of time the people should wait? Because you all say we want to do rural economic development, we need broadband.
Well, we're in the room right now with AT&T.
So we should be able to
and
expect
MCI.
some language by when?
It depends on, I mean, it will be this year for sure. I mean, we're passing back documents back and forth. with
Because
both parties, red line.
whether it's health or whether it's cities and counties, we always get we're negotiating fairly and they're not in some capacity.
Right. I can only speak about us.
I understand, and all I just want is language. If everybody cares, we should be able to work this out.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else? Tom?
This kind of stuff. But following up on Matt's question, and going back to your picture of the power poles with the thing on top, that. I don't even know what 4G and 5G is, but I do know what 500 to 1,200 feet is, and that's useless. I mean, that won't even reach from the light pole in front of my house to my house in rural Georgia. That's what we're supposed to be talking about, not Metro where they already got internet service. So I don't get where we're accomplishing anything with this kind of stuff, and nobody has asked that question, and I probably shouldn't because I don't know what I'm talking about. But
Would you like me to answer it for you, Tom?
I mean, I don't know what we.
The answer to the question is that we have a resolution that urged this council to address the issue of small cell, even though it's not predominantly a rural issue, and that's why we're doing it.
And I am certainly not arguing with the guy that put the resolution in by any means.
I would not if I were you. Thank you, Darrell.
Thanks, sir.
Chris Clark.
So I'm not Chris Clark, but I look a little different than Chris Clark. My sport coats are not quite as loud as his might be at a meeting like this. I don't have red shoes, and I am wearing socks. So take that for what it's worth. You can tell him I said that, too. My name's Jason O'Rourke. I'm Vice President of Public Policy and Federal Affairs at the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. Chris Clark sends his regards. He is in Athens, Georgia this afternoon doing a local chamber county address for the summer, so he regrets he cannot be here. I'd like to talk to this issue broadly about how this small cell deployment and broadly broadband expansion impacts economic development. And I've titled this opening slide here, Data is the New Oil, because I want us to take a step back and think about how we're transmitting data and what transmitting data is about. And I'm hopeful that this will set the stage for some of the conversations y'all are going to have tomorrow, where some of our members are going to be here who can speak a little more specifically to their industry. So, thinking about the way that the 20th century economy was built, oil was a primary driver of economic development. Concrete, steel, and oil were how we built our businesses and how we built industry in the 20th century. The 21st century will be built more around concrete, steel, and data. And I want you to think about data the same way that we think about oil. It's a commodity that can be bought, sold, and traded based on its value. It's an input. It's a resource that is used to create something and add new value. And it's also an output. It's a resource that is a byproduct of other economic activity. And furthermore, it's an end product for end user consumers. Data acts in the same way as oil does in the way we build our modern economies. So I always have to have charts when I give these presentations, and you may not be able to see this totally clearly, but what we're showing here is employment by size of communities from 2010 to 2016. That top line that's going at the fastest rate is communities of 1 million plus. The dashed black line is the US average, and then the gray line is the next size down communities, 250 to 1 million. And then that yellow line is communities that are less than 250K. The blue line is a non-metro, non-micropolitan statistical area. We only see the job losses happening in these non-metro areas. This is what this council is all about, thinking specifically about the truly rural places, the 30 or so counties in this state that are not tethered to an economic development hub. Now these could be your bigger cities, your bigger hub communities, but these smaller metro areas are places like Clarksville and Blue Ridge, Dublin and Moultrie. These are places that are economic hubs for a part of the world, and the job centers are built around those economic hubs. They will continue to see growth as these economies are built around those hubs. So naturally, the investments in telecommunications infrastructure and in all infrastructure that is used to transfer data is first and foremost going to go to those hubs. It's where the most market users are, and it's also where they're going to see the most value after they make that investment. This is a chart developed by the Cornell University Community and Regional Development Institute. The blue chart on the left is the growth in median household income in non-metro areas that had high broadband adoption. The red bar on the right is growth in income from 2001 to 2010 in the communities that were otherwise similar but did not have high broadband adoption. So you see there is a statistical economic gain for a non-metro area. That's those 30 or so truly rural counties that don't act as an economic hub. You can see there is higher economic growth and higher household income growth. This is people who are making more money because they have higher broadband adoption in their communities. But adoption of broadband is a function of supply and demand. The supply is obviously the first step. The providers have to come in and provide access, but there is a demand side to this equation. There have to be enough people to justify the investment, and there also have to be enough people who are asking for this enhanced speed. Now, I know that this committee and other committees in the legislature have discussed that exact issue. In many cases, it's not just about broadband or small cell deployment, but about just the basic wireless infrastructure or other types of communication services that are more than just these 5G technologies. So the next slide here shows you the percentage of US adults who are home broadband users. So you see back starting in about 2000, it's 0, right? There was no broadband to be deployed in the US. We see it move up drastically throughout 2010, and it starts to plateau around 2012. Now that plateau is around the time that our smartphones become ubiquitous. People start moving away from purely reliant on home broadband and becoming more reliant on a smartphone as their primary source of accessing data. 2016 is the first time that we see a significant drop in the percentage of US adults who are home broadband users. Now these are your cord cutters that we're talking about, but it's not just cord cutters, it's not just people who no longer have home broadband, it's also people who never had any type of broadband to begin with. They didn't move away from home-based. They're the millennials who are coming into the market who will never even have home broadband. The future of data access and how people consume data is going to be built around people consuming it all over the place, not just at home. So right now, the primary place where you're going to consume the massive amount of data is in your own home. But as smartphones become faster, as the networks that are being built become broader, people will consume more and more data in places besides where they live. So this breaks out that same data based on suburban, urban, and rural. And the rural line, as you would guess, is the one at the bottom, is slightly lower than the suburban and the urban areas, but the trends are the same. They follow the same trend line, and you see that rural users are also beginning to drop as the percentage of adults who are home broadband users. Even in the rural parts of the US, people are moving towards a different type of technology. And so we've had this discussion, but there's a supply problem, but it's a chicken and egg problem for rural. Do you put the supply first and then the users will follow, or do the users demand it and then the supply follows? And I don't know that we've gotten to that yet, but there's obviously a different model in the rural parts of the state than there are in the suburban and especially the urban parts. And then broadly, the industry is shifting to that consumer demand. Portability for data access, being able to consume, whether it's video, business transactions, whatever it is, in somewhere else besides your home or your business. So I'll close and then take questions, but I'd like to say that this is what we would like to see from the Chamber's perspective as to why we think this is important. So to the question, we believe there needs to be a statewide standard for small cell, including the permitting, the fee schedule, and the regulatory process. We think that in order for businesses to make these significant capital investments, it needs to be stable and predictable. They need to know on a long-term timeline where they can go and what it will reasonably take in terms of capital and resources to deploy this network. The consumers of data are no longer going to be tied to a physical presence. Many of the old fee structures that we've built this model around rely on a consumer being a local consumer of data, and that model is increasingly becoming outdated. As people move across county lines throughout the day in order to consume data and consume information, it doesn't make sense for them to be for their fees to be tied to one specific local government. So I think that leads into where we need to have the next level of discussion. And I would encourage this committee and the legislature to begin the discussion of modernizing franchise fees and to something that reflects the true cost of administering the right-of-way, and to try to resist the taxing and the regulation and de-incentivizing the key input in the modern economy. We've all hopefully made the point that data is what will, and access to data is what will drive job growth. And to the extent that we are taxing people's ability to access that data, we're going about this the wrong way. The near future will have consumers using this without regard to government borders, and increasingly it's going to be administered over the air. We're not that far off from a time when the terrestrial debate about what we do with the ground is gone. This is something that will move forward in our lifetime. So the idea that we built these franchise fees around natural monopolies, that there was one provider who would locate in a community because it only made sense for them to put that investment in if they were guaranteed the market. That's also a model that's increasingly out of date, because when we're breaking down these barriers to entry, we're making it easier for competition to thrive. And from the Chamber's perspective, competition is a good thing. It's a process, and we clearly have markets right now that are not being served well. But if you look at the deployment of all of these types of communication services over time, they've grown. Whether it's the cable industry, whether it's the wireless communications industry, they all continue to serve more markets over time. Now, are the rural areas oftentimes going to be served towards the end of that curve? And, they likely are. And that's just the natural business progression of going to where the majority of your customers are first, where you'll see the fastest return on your investment. But we're breaking down these barriers. The barriers to entry are going away, and we're moving towards an economy that has more competitors competing for the same market and for the same users. And in our view, that's a positive step forward. But we do know that there's a lot of work to be done on this. I think tomorrow you're going to hear from several of our members that can probably go into better detail than I can about the specifics of where they stand on the proposed legislation. But I'd be happy to answer any questions generally about this topic or about the broad business community's view of this.
Mine's got a little bit to do with the future technology and where you see it, and it might be a better question for tomorrow for AT&T and Verizon and others. And it comes back to the franchise fees and the competitive disadvantage that we might be throwing legislatively in front of these guys to compete whenever we open up the market or whenever the market comes for satellite. Where do you see that?
Yes, I think that's where I'm getting to. Whether it's satellite or whatever it is, it's going to be transmitted over the air, right? And so I think that to some degree, franchise fees, they served a purpose at a time. And, you know, as we move away from the technologies that the franchise fees were built around, we're going to have to change the funding stream that goes to local governments. And in our perspective, it ought to be tied to the cost of administering, whether it's the right-of-way, or it's tied to the cost of administering the service broadly. You know, there are probably plenty of examples of local governments who are encouraging and really trying to get more providers in their area, and we can probably find anecdotes of those who, as was brought up earlier, are charging maybe above market rates. So I think that, in my view, thinking 5-10 years down the road, there's going to be a revenue issue for local governments if we stay with the current system, right? And so if we're thinking ahead about what's the proper way to fund local government and what's the proper way to encourage more deployment of broadband technology and small cell technology and all types of communications technology, looking deep at the franchise fee model is an appropriate step to begin taking.
And I do echo the Chamber's stated position as you just mentioned that increasing broadband internet across the state is an economic driver for job growth, and I appreciate that. There was one slide that you had. It was slide number 3, the bar, that one right there.
Yeah.
Figure 3.
Yeah.
Would you go through that just a little bit?
Yeah.
So the growth rate, I'm surprised there's not a larger, unless I'm just reading the growth rate change different.
Yeah.
Over a 10-year period or a 9-year period, those that had high adoption of broadband, 0.2325 versus 0.22. Does not seem to be a very large gap, although it, I will tell you that you made it look a lot larger there on your slide.
Yeah.
But could you tell me about this slide? I would expect there to be a fairly significant change, and that doesn't appear from the raw number to be significantly different.
So there are a lot more slides that go with this study that I'd be happy to share because I think there's probably some nuance that can be added to this. That's one point. The second point is you'd rather be the blue bar than the red bar, regardless, right? You'd always rather see faster and quicker and better economic growth and income growth. I think this committee has met and discussed a lot of the other reasons why that blue bar is not larger than the red bar. In these non-metro counties, they're facing a multitude of challenges: healthcare, education, declining property tax bases. So the fact that there is growth at all in these non-metro areas and growth that's more than double the rate of the otherwise similar counties, I think shows that it has an impact. But like many of the things that y'all have talked about, there are so many other legs of the stool for a local community, especially a non-metro area that doesn't have a tie to a regional economy that they have to deal with. This is just one piece of what could help them. But I'm happy to share more information on this study. There's a lot more to it and some other interesting data points that I think could provide some more information.
Robert.
I want to be clear.
Okay.
You're telling this group that franchise fees are a big impediment for deployment of broadband in rural areas. So you're kind of recommending that the state supplant franchise fees so it would be less cost for these companies to deploy it. Is that kind of what I heard or not?
So I think what I'm trying to get to is that in the long term, so in 10 years, 5 to 10 year time frame, franchise fees are going to continue to provide less revenue to local governments. And I think that the industry is going to figure out ways to not have to go through a model that relies on franchise fees. And that's a natural way for the industry to go, right? The technology is advancing in such a way that you can, there are all kinds of systems we have in place right now where similar communications, one provider pays a franchise fee, another provider doesn't. Same thing if you're in a county versus a city. There are different models in place built around franchise fees, and my general point is that it ought to be looked at if we're thinking about this on a longer term horizon.
However, wouldn't you say that in rural areas, those franchise fees are a pretty small part of revenue for local governments?
Sure.
Less than in a metro area.
Then the fewer users you have,
right,
the smaller it is going to be. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
But wouldn't you say a lot of small cities depend on this franchise fee as a revenue stream, and not just really providing a service by letting them put on the pole, but if they saw something like this and you sold them on it, that maybe they would understand that increase in revenue is more important than the franchise fee, which is going to eventually go away.
The cities are here, and I think they're speaking tomorrow, so I think they can. I'd be happy to talk to them afterwards, and they'll probably address some of this tomorrow. But you know.
But it just, I know how guarded a lot of cities are on their franchise fees, and all politics
Sure.
is local, and so I don't want to.
And I bring it up, and I apologize if I've created more problem than y'all had when y'all started my presentation. But I think that it's worth discussing, and I think that it is obvious. It's very clear that local governments, to some degree, have built a lot of their services around this model, and that's the system that we built.
It's going away. I mean, look at DirecTV and all the sort of stuff people are using now.
So we built the funding model.
Streaming on your internet and all.
Yeah.
So it's just it's changing. So we better look at it.
The legislature a couple years ago addressed a similar issue with the gasoline tax, in that we had sort of a model that was based on an old method, and it didn't keep pace with growth. It didn't keep pace with the way that transportation was changing. And I see this as a similar approach, that we often have to readdress our funding systems and our revenue systems as the economy changes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone? All right, Jason, thank you very much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a little bit of time built in here for any questions or discussions that y'all might have. I think we've all learned a little bit about wine and grapes and everything else today, and have certainly learned a little bit here on small sale and some of the issues around that. And I would say Jason brought up a couple of points that I had not thought about necessarily in the way that he had presented them, so it's kind of got me scratching my head on a few things. Our transportation from the hotel back to right across the road over here, where Commissioner Black and the Georgia Grown folks are preparing dinner for us. Buses will be at the hotel at 5:45 to start transporting folks back over here. So if you want to eat, you want to be on a bus, there are going to be 2 buses. Again, 5:45. Otherwise, tomorrow morning we will start at 8 o'clock here in this room, and I'd like for everybody to be here on time, because the later we are starting is the later we are getting back home. And I think maybe Darlene wins the prize for the furthest traveled, I think, literally from one state line to the other. So, but again, the dinner is going to be served at 6:30 across the road over there, and we will talk a little bit about our sponsors at that point. So, the per diem sheet is here, so if you have not filled it out, either do so today or tomorrow before you leave. And with that, we are adjourned until dinner. Thank you.